The Enemy You Know. A Tale of the Assassin Without a Name by Scott Marlowe. The 92 Stormweaver had just hit that perfect note of oak and cherry when the door to my private dining room burst open to admit half a dozen armored men. Right before their arrival, I heard a ruckus in the hallway outside that I hoped was about to ruin someone else's night. No such luck. The mercenaries, hard men with harder stares, surrounded my table. No need to guess their allegiance, since I recognized the black sword insignia on each surcoat. At their head was none other than Marcus Nelson, former lieutenant of the Black Guard, but now the captain of the newly formed mercenary company, the Black Blades. Weapons remained in scabbards, so while my hand had shot to the hilt of a long knife upon their arrival, I followed their example and kept my steel hidden. I set my wineglass on the table. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" My meal, the most delicious roast boar served with spiced apples and herb-crusted potatoes, was only half eaten, so I hoped whatever business brought Nelson and his mercs here wouldn't take long. The captain didn't respond, though he did try to skewer me with his glare while his men searched the room. I was about to ask them what they hoped to find when my waiter entered with an embarrassed grin. "I apologize, sir. These gentlemen insisted on interrupting your dinner before allowing the lady admittance. I tried to tell them Osterland's harbors no dangers, but they wouldn't listen." I waved away his concern and asked, "What lady?" "This lady," a female voice said from the doorway. Though too many mercenaries blocked my view, I knew the voice all the same. Given the present company, hearing it didn't surprise me in the slightest. "Good evening, Gwendolyn." The wall of mercs parted, and there stood Gwendolyn Goddard, looking as striking as ever in an ermine-trimmed winter coat, her luxurious blonde hair done up in the latest court fashion of curls and waves. She removed the coat, the barest melting snowflakes visible on the shoulders, and handed it to the waiter to reveal a dazzling blue evening gown that shimmered like the surface of a calm mountain lake under the moonlight. The gown was a sight to behold, and probably worth more than clients paid me to commit murder. Or maybe the sight was the woman wearing it, the fabric hugging her in all the right places, and the blues deepening in a mesmerizing display as the eye traveled its length. Gwendolyn's striking blue eyes, a mirror of the gown, sparkled with confidence and poise, revealing a hint of mischief beneath their elegant facade. She was used to commanding a room, so with a single glance, the mercs closest to her took sentry positions by the door while she sauntered closer. Without a word, one of her men pulled out a chair for her. "Good evening, Thomas," she said, sitting. She perused my dinner, then lifted her chin to the waiter. "I'll have whatever he's having. The wine, too. Especially the wine. I've had quite the night, let me tell you." The waiter scurried off with the lady's coat while the Black Blades settled into positions about the dining room. At least they'd stopped their searching. "Expecting trouble?" I asked. Gwen huffed. "I told Captain Nelson you wouldn't hurt me, but he insisted on securing the room before I entered. I apologize for the interruption. I know how you value these quiet moments alone." I sipped my wine. "How do you know I won't hurt you?" "The old gods know you deserve it." "Pfft." Gwen waved away my not-so-veiled threat. "You would have never learned about the dragon's blood if it weren't for me. We both benefited from that little escapade, didn't we? You told the warders where to find our samples, and they stole them back. Our side didn't benefit at all." "Yes, but at least you know about it," she said. "That's better than not knowing at all, isn't it?" Her logic bore some validity, I had to admit. "You mentioned the value of quiet moments alone," I said, glancing at Captain Nelson and the others. Gwen got the hint. "Captain, you and your men can wait outside." "But Ms. Goddard—" "That was not a request, Captain." Nelson hesitated, but he gestured at his men to follow him outside. He flashed me one final glare, and then he exited the room. The last merc to leave shut the door behind him. "I was hoping you'd leave too," I said, spearing a piece of roast boar with my fork. Gwen flashed me a thin smile, but before she could answer, the waiter returned with Miss Goddard's food and an empty wineglass. While he poured her a glass from the bottle chilling on the sideboard, Gwendolyn tore into her meal, sparing neither the boar nor the potatoes with her first salvo. "It's amazing how hungry a night of coercion and blackmail will make you," she said between mouthfuls. "I came here straight from an engagement, but the food was absolutely dreadful." She plucked the glass from the waiter's hand before he set it on the table and drank, not coming up for air until she drained it. "Another." The waiter dutifully refilled her glass, leaving us after I dismissed him with a nod. "Coercion?" I asked. "Blackmail too," she said. "You remember I told you about a warder mole inside the society? Well, I found him. He works for me now." She said the last with a satisfying grin I knew too well since I'd been on the receiving end of it before. With the proper motivation, it's not hard at all to get people to do what you want, wouldn't you agree? "Undoubtedly, but I'm still wondering why you're here." Gwen took another drink, this time a more civilized portion. "The wine has an odd taste." "It's stone wine," I said. "Dwarven, if you can believe that." I didn't know dwarves made wine. Most don't. It's mostly beer and ale with them, but a select few have a more refined taste. They've actually perfected an aging process that uses casks made of stone. The stonemasons of Brockentor in the Ugal Mountains craft the casks from a special material found in the deepest part of their mountain. The fermentation and clarification process has some unique. Gwen tossed her fork onto her plate and, with arms outstretched, let out a yawn loud enough to wake the dead, or at least loud enough to interrupt me. "Sorry," she said when she noticed my look. "It's been a long night." "It seems to only get longer too," I said with a sour expression. "You were about to tell me why you're here." Pushing her plate away, Gwen placed both elbows on the table, leaned in with a smirk, and said, "I know about the Tillwood device." "Tillwood device? What's that?" Gwen rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. I know your girlfriend stole my sheaf key and gave it to Atticus. That meddling fool probably had the parchment unlocked and his scientists poring over the design in no time. My design, I should add. Tillwood's contribution was rudimentary at best." I leaned back with my wine glass poised between us. Maybe Atticus should have named it the Goddard device instead. "My thoughts exactly. I'm actually amazed Atticus built it so quickly. Who does he have working on it? The Cranes? That's who I would have chosen to work on the project. Remy is brilliant, and Ruby is as sharp as they come." Heaping praise on the scientists who had used her stolen documents to bring her machine to life was unexpected, but I extolled her virtue for not holding them at fault. Like the rest of us, they were mere cogs in the machine. "Have you considered collaborating with Atticus? As I understand it, the Cranes built a prototype, so I'm sure there's room for improvement." Gwendolyn waved a dismissal with her glass, almost sloshing her wine onto the table. "Not in this lifetime. Atticus is a stubborn arse, and I'll be damned if I'll ever work alongside him ever again." "Isn't that a bit like the pot calling the kettle black? Never mind. The better question is, why are you here?" "I'm here to offer a collaborative proposal," Gwen said. "A joint venture, if you will." "As in a partnership?" I asked, not sure if I should feel intrigued or afraid. "If you want to call it that. I thought about what you said about the warders, and you're right." "Of course I am," I said without thinking. "Remind me, what exactly did I say?" "That their actions will cause the destruction of Alchester." "Ah, yes, that. What brought you around?" "You said they were working on something big, and they are. We both know about the dragon scales and the Olix processing, but they let me in on something bigger recently. They're building an energy weapon. High-yield particles, extreme temperatures, a new type of radiation from what I can tell. Nasty stuff all around. As you might expect, they've kept much of the information compartmentalized as they do. But since they need my scientists' help with the internal shielding, the particle transformation, and some other tasks, I've been able to come to my own conclusion regarding the end result. Based on what I've learned, the weapon's yield will surpass any known weapon in any arsenal. The Panthorans don't even have anything close. So I'm guessing the destructiveness of this weapon will be exceptional?" Gwen nodded. "Downright cataclysmic." More than enough to stop a dark god, I imagine. Another nod. But building their god-killer hinges on one fatal flaw. A single point of failure, if you will. Feeling I was about to learn why she needed my help, I stayed silent, waiting for her to go on. Do you know about the heart of the dragon? I recently learned of its existence, yes. Though I hadn't seen or heard anything about the artifact since Leonidas had disappeared with it, I checked over the coming days, learning Leonidas had returned to his duties as administrator of the Merchants' League. But the fate and ultimate destination of the heart of the dragon remained unknown. Good, Gwen continued. Then I won't waste time explaining its significance. There are two things you need to know about it. The first, the warders plan to use it to power their weapon. The second, that after much searching, my little mole tells me they've finally found it. Really? I asked, playing dumb. Do you know where to find it? Why? Gwendolyn's eyes gleamed with mischief. Thinking of sending your girlfriend to steal it? I laughed. She'd do a much better job of it than I ever could, but no. This one I'd like to do myself. I'm in for anything that will throw a spanner in the warder's plans for the heart. Oh, then you might like what I have to say. I waited for her to elaborate. I don't know where the warders are keeping the heart, but my mole tells me they're having problems adapting its energy. Some sort of compatibility problem with the weapon. You're working with them. Why not ask them? Because the heart's existence is one of their most closely guarded secrets. They haven't said a word about it to me or almost anyone else. If I broach the subject, they'll know they have a leak. Worse, since I'm the one doing the asking, it won't take them long to realize their mole in the society has been compromised. And if your mole's compromised, then so are you. Exactly. The trust I've established with the warders will be destroyed, and they'll cut off all business relations with the society. They're paying us a lot for our help, so I hate jeopardizing that. Of course, I said, not missing that Gwen said nothing about the mole's fate, whom the warders would most likely deal with harshly. So, what's your plan? A woman as intelligent as Gwendolyn always had a plan. She leaned in conspiratorially and said, "The warders are working under some sort of deadline. I don't know why the rush all of a sudden, but they're burning the midnight oil, trying to unlock the heart's secrets and complete the weapon as quickly as they can. This, of course, is our opportunity." Finally, we got to the reason Gwen interrupted my dinner. I'm hosting a visiting scientist from the CCN capital who specializes in waveform energy. This scientist, his name is Jordan Dutton, has a reputation as a bit of a maverick. Someone who isn't afraid to push experimental boundaries. Exactly the kind of scientist the warders like to work with, in other words. I've already made sure the warder's mole passed on information about his impending arrival. His specialty and their need to solve their current problem quickly will make reaching out to him impossible to resist. I, of course, will help the process along by acting as an intermediary. I don't expect the warders to grant Mr. Dutton full access to the heart, but they might part with a small energy sample. They'll need to provide something if they want Professor Dutton to help them. But any help Dutton provides is merely a ruse, correct? You don't intend to allow him to assist them in any meaningful way. I hesitated. Do you? Of course not. What I'm really after is the sample. Given sufficient time to study it, I think I can devise a way to locate the heart. You see, every device, whether mechanical or magical, gives off a specific energy frequency when activated. Once I know the heart's frequency along with some other data points, I believe I can program an encoder to help us locate it. Once we know where to find it, we either inform the authorities about its location or act on the information ourselves. Either way, we've got the warders by the short hairs. Now that sounded like the Gwendolyn I knew, though I saw a potential problem with her plan. How do you know the professor will go along with all this? Gwendolyn smirked. Oh, he won't have much choice in the matter since I plan to drug him. Come again. Professor Dutton will have a nice dinner, a few too many drinks, and then, before the warders arrive to ask for his help, he'll feel so sleepy he'll beg my forgiveness and retire for the evening. That's where you step in to take his place. She finished her explanation with a mischievous grin meant to enamor me to her wiles. It did not. That's a bold plan, considering I know nothing about Dutton, not to mention I don't have the scientific training or knowledge. I preferred simple disguises, like a waiter who garnered little attention or a well-to-do businessman, which mostly required acting like the most important person in the room. For some reason, I had a knack for that. Other considerations came to mind, which I spelled out. There's his physical characteristics to consider too. Height, build, that sort of thing. I have no idea what he looks like either. But if the warders do, your plan will go up in smoke faster than shavings in a furnace. I can approximate someone's appearance, which might fool them at a distance, but close conversation is another matter entirely. Gwendolyn humphed. You think I haven't thought about all that already? The warders have never met him, nor have I for that matter. But since they'll never meet or even see the real Dutton, you have some liberties regarding his appearance. You have a special ability to blend in and earn people's trust. I've seen it myself. No one expects you to perform an analysis on the spot, but you will need to convince them you're competent before they'll hand over a sample. If any scientific questions come up, I'll be there. I can help guide you through it. I sat back, considering her plan and, more concerning, her allegiances, which she claimed aligned with my own. I had to assume her ultimate goal was to either steal the heart or, at the very least, its design, making this ruse only the first part of that plan. But finding, or stealing, the heart seemed a concern for another day. If I played my cards right, I could make sure others besides Gwendolyn benefited from her ruse. But that meant bringing in others, something I wasn't sure she was going to like. I also considered my plan to ensnare her. Thorn had set the wheels in motion, so I followed through and completed arranging the delivery of the Tillwood device to the guild. Word about the sale of the device would go out soon, but since helping Gwendolyn now had no bearing on that scheme, I saw no reason not to accept her proposal. All right, I'll do it, but I have conditions. I want to bring someone else in to play the role of an assistant and act as another point of distraction. It can help in situations like these. To my surprise, Gwen had no problems at all with that. That doesn't seem unreasonable, she said. Anyone in particular you have in mind? I couldn't help but smirk. I do, actually, and I think you're going to like her. You want me to do what? Elizabeth had been delighted to see me when I entered the room. She looked resplendent in a simple gown, its auburn color perfectly matching her loose, shoulder-length hair. Through towering windows, snow could be seen falling outside. A mighty fire blazed in the hearth, warming the small apartment and reflecting from the gray-flecked depths of Liz's eyes as she'd risen from a settee to greet me. Never one's for chit-chat, I explained the reason for my visit right away, leaving out none of the details. Liz's expression, so lovely at first, had turned thoughtful and full of interest. No one wanted to foil the warder's plans more than she did, and this seemed the perfect opportunity to strike a decisive blow against them. She expressed some misgivings about Ms. Goddard's involvement, but she finally rolled her eyes and accepted it for what it was. But when I told her about impersonating the scientist, or rather the involvement of an assistant, her expression melted into darkness. Uncertain about what had upset her, I attempted to explain the reasoning behind why she was the ideal candidate for the assistant position until she cut me off with her outburst. I hesitated to answer for fear of raising her sudden anger to new levels, but her hands on her hips demanded I do so, and fast, so I said, The scientist's assistant is hardly a role you'll have any trouble with, Liz. It likely won't even require much effort on your part. Very little talking, I should think. A smile here and a nod there, perhaps, but nothing more. Keep talking, Liz said, glaring now. The hole is getting deeper. I looked around my feet. Why is there a hole at all? Because, as usual, you're a complete idiot, I know. I pursed my lips. Perhaps you could share what about this time? You really think the best play here is for you to take the role of the scientist and me, the assistant? Let me ask you this. What's an inverted diplex radial field? Or how many cohedrons does a standard containment matrix require? Or how... I held up my hands, surrendering. I get the idea. I take it you know the answers? Of course you do. And many more, I suppose. That's right, I have the experience. You don't. When we were separated, I spent a few weeks impersonating a technologist specializing in energy containment, so not too different from Professor Dutton's field. It was a junior role, so I could easily explain any gaps in my expertise, but I picked up enough to hold my own in a conversation, especially if I have you as my assistant, ready to act as my foil if needed. I knew better than to dismiss Liz's ideas out of turn, so I considered it with the seriousness it deserved. However, one fatal flaw came to mind almost immediately. "Jordan Dutton is a man," I said. "I'm not questioning your impersonation skills, but I'm not sure even you could pull that off." "You know that for sure?" "That Dutton's a man, or do you mean your impersonation skills?" Liz looked ready to stamp her foot, preferably onto mine. "Right," I said, knowing which one she meant. Reviewing my conversation with Gwendolyn, I distinctly remembered her repeatedly referring to the professor as a man. But she also said she'd never met him, though she must have read about him in a journal or some other scientific periodical. Still, did she know for certain? "I don't think I can say either way," I finally admitted. Liz sat. "You said the warders have never met him, right?" "That's what Gwendolyn said, but yes. Then they may know nothing about him." "That's possible," I said. "Then there's no reason Jordan Dutton can't be a woman." She had me there. "All right," I said. "If you say you can pull this off, then I believe you. The old gods know my chances were fair at best. How long until you're ready?" "When is Ms. Goddard's reception?" I gave Liz all the details. Mr. or Mrs. Dutton's arrival was days away, leaving little time to prepare, but neither of us was concerned since we'd each done more with less. Once I said all I could, I sat down next to Liz, figuring why not take advantage of some alone time. I should have known better. Give Liz a job, and that becomes her sole focus. With limited time to prepare, she probably had the right of it, so as I settled back on the settee and enjoyed the fire, Liz paced the room, rattling off all the things we needed to do, starting with coming up with the assistant's name. "Alfred Harrow," I said. Liz stopped. "Any particular reason?" I shrugged. I liked the sound of it. Liz resumed pacing. "We'll need to visit Guildhouse to find the right clothing. I might need a pair of spectacles." She deviated down a hallway. When she returned, she hurled a book my way. "Skim through that. It covers the basics. Make sure you at least have some familiarity with the terms." The cover displayed the title, "The Principles of Alchemical Energy Transfer," with Elsinore Thorne and Aaron Shepard credited as the authors. I flipped through several pages filled with dense blocks of text with tables of data and diagrams scattered throughout before tossing the book aside. I had no idea who Elsinore and Aaron were, but I imagined they were the dullest guests at any gathering. "When you're done with that, we can play out a few likely scenarios. We can use someone from the guild to act as the warder representative. Then I think we should—" I sprang up, wrapped Liz in an embrace, and kissed her. "Ms. Dutton," I said, "surely the remainder of our planning can wait until the morning." The way she kissed me back told me all I needed to know. "I believe you two know each other." "Quite," Elizabeth said. "Indeed," Gwendolyn said at the same time. Gwendolyn had her arms crossed and lips pressed. Liz made fists at her sides. I realized my vulnerability too late, given that I stood between them. But I also recognized that without me in the middle, they might tear each other limb from limb. Briefly, I entertained the thought of stepping out of the way to see what happened. But since we needed Miss Goddard intact, I put my personal amusement aside and said to Gwendolyn, "I hope you'll find we look the part of an accomplished scientist and her dashing but humble assistant." Gwendolyn looked no less peevish as her gaze roved over us. If she seemed unimpressed by Elizabeth's flair for adventure with her black leather coat draped over a patterned vest and a burgundy blouse and olive trousers, she was even less so when she took in my more conservative tweed waistcoat, plain white shirt, and wire-rimmed glasses. I informed Gwen about our change in roles yesterday. At first she was unhappy and skeptical with our decision, but between my assurances and her personal experience with Elizabeth, she eventually came around. "I didn't realize Ms. Dutton was such an adventurer," Gwendolyn said. "He, or rather she, is a laboratory researcher. not an archaeologist. You look like you're about to head out on an expedition." Gwendolyn, in contrast, wore a modest blue gown tied at the waist by a thin belt, an outfit perfectly suited to the party's host. Elegant braids highlighted her long blonde hair, while Liz wore hers with an edgy, tousled look that matched her persona's bravado. "Ms. Jordan Dutton is an expert in her field," Liz said, slipping into the role like an actress donning the perfect costume for a leading role, her confidence radiating as she embraced the persona with ease and authority. Quite possibly the expert, but that's debatable by some who clearly have no idea what they're talking about. She didn't get there by being meek, humble, or deferring to anyone. Jordan is confident, daring, and isn't afraid to push the boundaries. She's exactly the kind of person the warders like to do business with. I worked for them at one time, so I should know. "Humph," Gwen said, "if you say so." "It worked on you, didn't it?" Ever since barging into the Broken Sword Tavern with half a squad of Black Blade mercenaries on her arse, Liz had been light on the details surrounding her acquisition of Gwendolyn's sheaf key. I knew she'd assumed an identity that Ms. Goddard found hard not to notice. Someone who could gain her confidence and spend enough time with her to identify and eventually pilfer the sheaf key. But in the end, someone had discovered Liz's ruse, so it stood to reason that Gwendolyn and she had not parted on favorable terms. But what's done is done, and we had another job in front of us. Bickering or holding a grudge served no purpose now. Gwendolyn stayed silent while she bit her lip, but she finally arrived at the same conclusion. "It did indeed," she said, letting her arms crash to her sides. "A fine bit of work, too. It isn't easy to fool me." Liz released her fists, letting the tension drain from her. "Don't let it bother you. You're good at what you do, but so am I. Like I said, I know the warders, and I know how to convince others I'm someone I'm not. My assistant, Mr. Harrow, isn't half bad either." I flashed Liz a sour look while running my fingers through my pasted-on beard. "Thanks?" "The beard is a nice touch," Gwen said. "It actually doesn't look bad on you." Elizabeth's primary contact with the warders had died in a fiery explosion, so the chances of someone recognizing her, while not inconsequential, remained small. I, however, had too many run-ins with warder compulsors, exactors, and even their grand leader sans my mask. But that's where some extra touches came in, like my faux beard, glasses, a slight stoop, and a change in my voice. Elizabeth's persona wasn't far from her own, but mine projected everything I wasn't. Meek, studious, introverted, and subservient. Gwen met each of our stares. "You're both clear on the objective?" I couldn't flat out ask the warder representative to bring a sample of the heart's energy, because I'm not supposed to know anything about it. But if he does, make sure he knows you'll need to keep it overnight to perform a full and proper assessment. Since I'll be doing the analysis, I'll need time to take it to my lab and run some tests. Liz nodded her understanding. "And if he doesn't have it with him, I'll offer to perform an analysis whenever it's convenient, letting him know I'm leaving the city in a day or two. That should allay any suspicion while giving him a gentle kick in the arse not to wait too long." Speaking of the warder's representative, is everything else set? I relayed the information about Professor Dutton's arrival to my warder spy 2 days ago. This morning I received word they want to meet him, I mean her, during tonight's reception. Turned out Gwendolyn didn't know the professor's gender for sure, leaving the question unanswered until his, or her, arrival. I told them a private meeting served their purposes better, so their representative won't arrive until an hour after the party begins. I have a room set aside at the back of the house. A few others from the society will be here, but they're people I trust. I'll let Mr. or Mrs. Dutton, the real one, have one drink before I drug him. Or her. She shook her head, frustrated by the dichotomy of the situation. When she continued, she decided our Mark's gender once and for all. She'll be sleeping the night away in my guest room before she knows it. When she wakes, she'll think she had too much to drink and nothing more. "You have no idea who the warders are sending?" I asked, still wary someone might recognize me despite my precautions. "None." I never liked rolling the dice on a job, but sometimes it was the only move. So while Gwendolyn left to ensure everything was ready for the party, we loitered about Gwen's study. Most of the books covered uninteresting scientific subjects, so I spent my time polishing a small knife I kept hidden in a forearm sheath. At the same time, Liz wandered about, taking in every nuanced decoration, award, and painting Gwendolyn had on display, until, halfway to the appointed time, Gwen returned. "Jordan Dutton is a man," she said, putting that question to bed once and for all. "It changes nothing," I said, reassuring Liz, whose professional facade hinted at cracking. We knew changing our roles was risky, but we accepted it. So, let's hope for the best. Worst case, we find another way to learn more about the heart. Liz nodded, but looked no less worried as she paced the room. The next time the door opened, Gwendolyn had news about the warder representative. "He's here," she said. "I don't recognize him, but he says his name is Victor Cartwright." Neither of us knew the name. "My greeter is escorting him directly to the meeting room as we speak." "What about Jordan Dutton?" I asked. "Is he out of commission?" Gwendolyn smirked. "Quite. He's sleeping off his excess of liquor, and the sleeping agent I slipped into his drink, somewhere private where no one will disturb him." We waited a few more minutes to give Mr. Cartwright time to get settled before following Gwen down an unremarkable hallway to an unremarkable room, perfect for clandestine meetings. Plain walls, plain wood flooring, and a small table with a scattering of chairs around it. Victor Cartwright, who occupied one of the chairs, had the look of a compulsor about him. Neat beard and mustache, short-cropped hair, and a stern face that had never experienced a smile. He wore a pressed white shirt under a plain waistcoat. An equally unimpressive bowler and a long coat occupied a rack in the corner. One eyebrow arched at our arrival, but the warder made no other reaction, not even standing to greet us. "Professor Dutton, I presume?" Mr. Cartwright asked, his gaze passing over me to linger on Liz, studying her with an appraising eye I didn't appreciate. I wouldn't describe his stare as ogling, but more like sizing up his next meal. Liz extended a hand in greeting. "Professor Jordan Dutton." Victor glanced at her hand but didn't take it. "I assumed by your name that you were a man." Liz took his rudeness in stride, pulling out a chair opposite the warder and sitting. Gwendolyn followed suit. I continued standing, hovering in the background like an obedient assistant. "Most people do," Elizabeth said. "But as you can see, I am not. Is that a problem?" "None at all," Victor said in a neutral tone. When he said nothing else, Liz jumped right in. "Ms. Goddard tells me you need my help to solve a problem. She was light on the details, so perhaps you can enlighten me and my assistant. Oh, forgive me. This is Mr. Harrow." She glanced over her shoulder, sharing a private smirk. "My apologies, Mr. Harrow. It's so easy to forget you're there sometimes." I returned a thin smile, then bowed my head to the warder, who seemed uninterested in anything having to do with Alfred Harrow. "I represent the Warding Mining and Manufacturing Company," Mr. Cartwright said. "Our innovators have devised a new piece of mining equipment, but they're having difficulty achieving the proper energy yield." Liz leaned closer. "What kind of equipment?" "That's not important. Should you prove worthy of the task, we need your help to analyze the energy matrix." "Prove worthy?" Liz asked, smirking. "Yes, nothing more than a formality, I hope. Ms. Goddard speaks highly of you, but our design is at a critical stage. The mining industry is highly competitive, and secrecy is of the utmost importance during these early stages of development. I am authorized to share a sample of the energy our engineers are attempting to use to power the equipment, but only if you have the requisite knowledge to make this endeavor worthwhile. I'm sure you understand." Liz leaned back and crossed her legs. "Of course. By all means, fire away. No one knows more about energy formulation, transformation, or containment than I do. So, ask your questions." With elbows on the table, Victor steepled his fingers. "Very well. My first question is this. Given a source of arcane energy, what principles guide your approach concerning the storage of that energy?" I crossed my arms, which might have seemed like a gesture of concern, except I also leaned against the wall and yawned at the perceived simplicity of the question. Liz glanced my way, admonishing me with her eyes. Sorry, I said, ducking my head. Arcane energy? Liz asked Mr. Cartwright. I thought the warding company designed mining equipment. The question may exceed the parameters of our current project, but I assure you, it is necessary. If, however, you cannot answer— No, it's fine, Liz said. But instead of answering the question, she fell silent for some seconds until even that little bit of time stretched into an eternity. I shifted, hoping our endeavor wasn't over before it had begun. Liz interrupted the uncomfortable silence by clearing her throat, either buying time or waiting for Gwendolyn to step into the conversation. But that wouldn't do, and Liz knew it. Fortunately, she was only posturing, allowing the question to ferment before skewering it. For effective containment, Liz said, I recommend starting with the properties of the container itself. The material must resonate with the type of energy stored to prevent leaks. Crystal-infused metal or enchanted glass are two viable options. Liz affected a thin smile. I can provide more if needed. Victor gave no response other than to ask the next question. How do you ensure the energy's stability over time once it's contained? A thoughtful expression crossed Elizabeth's face as she considered the question. She absent-mindedly brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, her brow furrowing in concentration. Stability hinges on several factors, she began, her tone contemplative, as if piecing together a complex puzzle. First, implement glyphs of stabilization to counteract fluctuations in energy. A constant low-level infusion of an external stabilizing force will maintain equilibrium from there. Victor raised an eyebrow. External stabilizer? What might that entail in practical terms? Elizabeth raised her hands, genuflecting as she spoke. Some might suggest a flow of ambient ether, but I prefer something more constant, like a mechanical energy generator. This prevents depletion or wild surges, providing a more predictable field. Mr. Cartwright sniffed. How would you implement the transference of contained energy to another system? Silence, while thoughts swirled through her mind. Transference requires precise calibration. First, I'd establish a conduit, something like a resonance chamber that harmonizes with both the source and the destination. Employing an alchemical catalyst typically enhances the efficacy of the transfer. Can you elaborate on what constitutes an effective catalyst in this context? Of course. Liz leaned back, comfortable with the way the session progressed so far. I'd consider a rare element possessing unique vibrational properties. Silurite, for example. It amplifies energy flow and reduces the chance of backlash during the transference. Victor pursed his lips, considering his next question. What about formulation? During a high-yield energy expulsion, is it necessary to— Gwendolyn shoved her chair back and stood. Are you not satisfied already? Professor Dutton has answered every question without batting an eyelash. You're putting Mr. Harrow to sleep and risking my ire because you're keeping the professor and me from my reception. Now, if you have something to examine, let's have it. Otherwise, we're finished here. Victor raised an eyebrow at Gwen's display. I have more questions. I don't doubt you do, sir, I said, pushing away from the wall. But the professor has had a long day already. We arrived in the city this very afternoon, and Professor Dutton already had a full schedule before Ms. Goddard passed on your inquiry. I cautioned Professor Dutton about taking on too much, but the mystery around your request intrigued her to no end. However, if you remain unsatisfied with her qualifications, then, as Ms. Goddard indicated, our business must conclude so the professor can return to her planned schedule. I pushed my spectacles back to the bridge of my nose and waited for the warder's response. We all did. Mr. Cartwright leaned back in his chair, the most movement I'd seen from him since we'd entered the room. I am not yet satisfied with Professor Dutton's level of expertise. However, I am sensitive to the challenges of maintaining a busy schedule, so I appreciate your patience. I must stress the secrecy of what I am about to show you. Knowledge of it must not leave this room. Victor withdrew a small crystal suspended within a housing of bronze ribbons from his waistcoat pocket. The ribbons had tiny glyphs etched into their surface, and the crystal glowed crimson. In fact, it did more than glow. It pulsed like the heart of the dragon did in Finrad's treasure vault. This is a sample of energy taken from a very special artifact, I am not at liberty to discuss the artifact itself, but I can tell you that the energy is unlike anything anyone has seen in the modern age. We all felt the electric intensity charging the room, but Elizabeth took the sample with a steady hand. The container was delicate yet imposing, the faint pulsating glow of the energy within, casting shifting patterns against the walls. Liz ran her finger along the bronze ribbons, stopping at each intricate, shimmering rune that pulsated in sync with the energy inside. Carefully, Liz rotated the vial, examining each symbol. "The containment glyphs are duplicated many times," she murmured. "You must have some concerns regarding the intensity, even though the sample is relatively small." Mr. Cartwright said nothing, waiting for Liz to complete her initial assessment. I wondered at the extent of her knowledge, but there seemed no end to how much she knew. The material choice is excellent. Bronze conducts and stabilizes energy flow, enhancing the efficacy of the runes. Her gaze wandered to the crystal vial. This isn't ordinary glass. There's a grain to its structure that suggests magical properties. She angled the vial with delicate precision to observe the energy swirling inside. The energy almost appears pyromantic in nature. What do you think, Ms. Goddard? Gwen leaned closer. I did my part too, hovering over their shoulders as if examining the energy myself. Gwendolyn held a measuring device over the sample. I agree it appears pyromantic, but its frequency tells a different story. It's certainly not one I've seen before. That's interesting. Gwen's expression became thoughtful. The frequency changes as it pulses. We rarely see such fluctuations, I said, unsure but knowing that even if I was mistaken, it mattered little since I was nothing more than an assistant. That's right, Mr. Harrow, Elizabeth Ms. Dutton said. Energy sources always exhibit a predicted range, but look at the fluctuation. It has 3 different base frequencies. It's like 3 different sources entirely, yet it's only a single energy stream. 3 sources? Gwendolyn asked, her gaze fixated on the pulsing energy. Yes, you're right. There, see it? There are 3 distinct pulsating rhythms. I noticed it too. 2 pulses, or beats, then 3, followed by 2 more, 3, 2, 3, before ending at 4 beats in succession before returning to the original pattern. Mr. Cartwright sat up a little straighter. We attribute that to the nature of the device. The challenge we have encountered is harnessing all the device's energy. Combining the 3 sources is proving challenging. Liz rotated the sample in her hands. It seems like a simple recombinator would solve that problem, wouldn't it? Gwendolyn asked. We tried that, of course, Victor said. But the sources themselves resist. It's almost as if they are a thing alive, and each does not wish to combine with the others. Something magical? Liz mused out loud. Or some property of the energy itself? That is something we hoped you could tell us, Victor said. Liz placed the sample on the table. I make no promises, Mr. Cartwright, but rest assured I intend to give this my full and utmost attention. If a solution exists, I will find it. Mr. Harrow. She glanced about as if she'd forgotten I was there, then recoiled in surprise when she noticed me standing so close. By the old gods, Mr. Harrow, must you hover, back away from us? Yes, ma'am. I took a humble step back. What can I do for you, Professor? Clear tomorrow's schedule. But, Professor, you've already committed to... I don't care. This is too important. A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, even. Give my regards to whoever I'm meeting tomorrow and see if they can reschedule. We'll remain in Alchester another day or 2 if needed. Of course, Professor, I responded dutifully. Liz returned her attention to Mr. Cartwright. Is there someone I can contact if I have questions or exhaust the sample before my analysis is complete? Mr. Cartwright smiled the thinnest of smiles. I think you'll find the sample more than adequate. It will take many such analyses before exhaustion. It is one of the unique properties of this energy type you will undoubtedly become familiar with soon. As for any questions you have, I will be your one and only contact. I will leave my information with Ms. Goddard. Liz and Gwen stood when Victor did. Above all other things, Professor Dutton, warding M&M requires the utmost secrecy regarding this project. You are not to share the sample or any resulting data or findings you collect with anyone outside this room. Failure to respect our wishes will result in consequences to your professional standing and your well-being." A lesser woman would have done a double-take, as if she'd misheard Mr. Cartwright's words. That same lesser woman might have become flummoxed or even frightened at the not-so-veiled threat. As Victor Cartwright was about to discover, Professor Dutton was not a lesser woman. "Did you just threaten me, Mr. Cartwright?" Victor's lips twisted into a smug smile. "Consider it a precautionary warning. Nothing more." "Huh," Liz said. "Mr. Harrow, I believe this gentleman threatened me." "Shall I hold off canceling tomorrow's meetings after all?" I asked. Liz leveled her piercing stare at Victor. She said nothing, letting the silence hang between them. It was all for show, of course, but I still found it satisfying watching Liz turn the screws. "Like your company, Mr. Cartwright, I'm careful about my choice of partners. If you say the practical application of this energy has to do with mining equipment, then I'll take your word for it. But we both know there are those in the world who wish to use science and technology for nefarious purposes. I'm not so virtuous that I'll bow out at the first sign of impropriety, but I also will not stand for threats or warnings against me or my assistant. Is that clear?" Victor affected a slight bow. "Apologies." Liz dismissed him with a glance. "Ms. Goddard, do you have a facility I can use to perform my analysis?" Gwendolyn did, so while she spoke of making arrangements to have her black blades accompany the professor and me there, I volunteered to escort Mr. Cartwright from the premises. At the door, an attendant retrieved Victor's coat. I signaled for mine and the professor's as well. Victor dismissed the doorman's attempt to call a carriage and stepped outside, where falling snow disturbed the warm light coming from nearby streetlights. Without a word of farewell, Mr. Cartwright strode away into the night. Liz soon joined me. With the reception still ongoing, we kept up appearances while putting on our coats and waiting for our transportation. "Everything all right, Alfred?" Liz asked me. "Everything is fine, Professor. Is all arranged with Ms. Goddard?" "It is," Liz said. "We'll begin tonight. We, or she, rather, hope to have an answer by tomorrow." "That soon?" She knows her science. When she noticed my contemplative stare, she leaned closer. "Something wrong?" "Nothing at all, but Liz knew me too well." "You don't trust Ms. Goddard will do what she says?" "Of course I don't. Do you?" "Well, no. You think she'll double-cross us?" I paused because I wasn't sure. "I think I'll try to find out." "You want help?" I shook my head. "I'll poke around a bit on my own. If she's up to something, I'll come find you." Outside, we dove into our carriage. While we warmed our hands by the heating stones, the driver lashed the draft and off we went, plowing through the ever-thickening blanket of snow. "So," I said, "you're free of Jordan Dutton's persona until tomorrow. And you, Alfred Harrow." "But the night is still young," I said, tugging at my fake beard. "Dinner? Drinks? You pick the place." Liz leaned against my shoulder, so I wrapped an arm around her. Soon she closed her eyes, humming a soft tune while I watched the snow fall through the carriage window. I'd told Liz nothing was wrong, but that wasn't true. Though she'd given no sign, I knew Gwendolyn too well. She was up to something, and I needed to find out what. Some hours later, we parted company. Liz had early morning duties with the guild, and I had my business with Gwendolyn. Returning home, I changed clothes and selected a small number of weapons, chief amongst them my long knives, Steel Island sword, and, courtesy of Jarek Blackwell, my new depleter crossbow. After acquiring the weapon from Blackwell, I went straight to Heavy Hammer with it. We both decided the weapon was most effective in my hands, so I hung on to the crossbow, adding it to my arsenal. Since then, I kept it with me almost all the time and always when prowling about at night. Isadora's reign of terror hadn't slowed, and while I'd spent considerable time searching for her these past few nights, she remained elusive. But I also knew we'd stumble upon each other eventually. The weather dictated extra layers, so I wore a thin base and a heavy wool gambeson under my studded leather vest, a heavy winter cloak over my shoulders, and a thicker-than-usual mask to keep the worst of the chilling wind from my face. Since repeated days and nights of freezing temperatures had left the rooftops frozen and treacherous, I wore spiked boots, the points shallow enough to grip without obstructing my running ability. The Progressive Society had multiple facilities across the city, though not all were equipped to complete the analysis of the heart's energy. But Atticus had access to those same laboratories. Since Gwendolyn wouldn't risk her chief rival interrupting her, the chances of the sample arriving at one of those were close to zero. That left only Gwendolyn's personal laboratory, its location a closely guarded secret but one I had known about for some time. I ventured there now, carefully leaping across rooftops because of the slippery conditions. Not surprisingly, most everyone had abandoned the streets below to the persistent flurries. The initial euphoria of the season's first snowfall had given way to grumblings about how much longer it would last, so that soon more and more people stayed indoors, wrapped in blankets and warming themselves by their fireplaces rather than brave the bitter cold. Even cobble stompers, grown tired of it, clustered inside guard stations on nights like tonight. I didn't like the conditions much either. But my business didn't stop just because the weather turned. Someday, I might tire of dealing with the harsh conditions like so many others, but not tonight. Gwendolyn sequestered her private laboratory amidst the quietness of a modest neighborhood. Screens covered windows, and nothing stood out about the place unless one noticed the regular delivery of alchemical supplies as I had. From the rooftop I saw Gwendolyn's carriage parked in front, so I tried peering through a snow-covered skylight by dusting a minimal amount of the snow away. I spied flickering lights and, leaning close, heard the distinct hum of machinery. I took both as a sign someone was inside working, but though I watched for movement, I saw none. Other than the machinery, I heard nothing. Neither did I see the expected pulse of crimson light. With the beginnings of a bad feeling needling at me, I dropped to the back of the house. I confirmed my suspicions when I spotted a black blade mercenary folded over on the ground, a frozen puddle of blood beneath him. Whoever killed the guard had also smashed the back door in. Drawing a knife, I crept inside. Boot prints outlined with slush marked the floor coming in and out. Past a small storage area, I entered the laboratory, where dim light from gas lamps flickered, their warm glow casting dancing shadows across walls adorned with intricate wood paneling and brass fixtures. Everywhere I looked, pandemonium reigned. Parchments covered by elegant scripts and elaborate sketches, some stained by spilled alchemicals, lay scattered across polished oak tables. Broken glass from vials or beakers littered the floor. Toppled stools, unattended experiments in the form of bubbling beakers, and the steady hum of unattended machinery highlighted the rest. A flash, an arc of energy, captured my attention, but it proved nothing more than a discharge between two coiled metal rods. I sniffed, wondering at the smell, which was at once acrid with alchemicals, but tinged by a hint of something metallic. Blood. Rounding a piece of machinery, I spotted two bodies sprawled across the floor, their lab coats stained dark. Gwendolyn's assistants, their lifeless eyes staring at nothing. Mindful of assassins lurking in the shadows, I crouched to examine the bodies. Like almost anyone, the pair had likely tried to turn and flee at the first sign of danger, but they weren't quick enough. One had a deep stab wound straight through his back. The other, lacerations across his hands, a cut to his arm, and, the final killing blow, a blood-soaked dent in his skull. The disparate wounds, one stabbing and the other blunt force, indicated at least two attackers, probably more, given how many boot tracks covered the floor. I explored the rest of the laboratory looking for Gwendolyn. I found two more black blades by the front entry, both dead from multiple stab wounds. Moisture, melted snow, I figured, speckled both corpses. They were likely killed outside and then dragged into the lab, so no passers-by stumbled upon them by happenstance. For reasons unknown, I breathed a sigh of relief when I didn't find Gwendolyn's body. She wasn't dead, but neither was she here. But did she flee into the night, leaving her carriage behind? Or did someone take her? Also, I wondered about the energy sample. Scanning the room once more, I sifted through the carnage on the floor and glanced across the tables, not seeing it. It wasn't in the open, The lack of a pulsing crimson light told me that much. But if Gwendolyn had enough advanced warning, she might have hidden it somewhere. Again, energy sizzled between the pair of metal rods. I ignored it, focusing on places where one might hide something valuable. A safe was an obvious possibility, so I started checking the walls, which were sparse and disappointingly bare of paintings or hidden catches. But I noticed something odd in one corner. A pair of floorboards, one higher than the other on one side. I pried the higher plank up with the tip of my knife, revealing a small floor safe. The metal door was closed but not locked, meaning someone had been in a hurry. Inside, buried amidst some scrolls and coins, I saw the warder's energy sample, still pulsing like a proverbial heart. That the sample remained meant Gwen's abductors, assuming someone had taken her, had come for her and her alone. But who kidnapped her? Not the warders. That wouldn't make much sense, given her business relationship with them. The Jakaree? Perhaps, though I didn't see the connection. Gwen had multiple enemies across the city, but few possessed the will or the resources to take down 3 mercenaries. Not to mention the pair of scientists. Their deaths struck me as unnecessary, suggesting a blatant disregard for life and a desire to leave no witnesses. I considered visiting Atticus, but something about this situation told me I didn't have time to waste if I hoped to find Gwendolyn alive. Which begged the question, why even look for her? I had the sample. I could deliver it to Atticus or the Cranes and have them determine what we needed to know about it. With Gwendolyn out of the picture, I'd call off my plan to ensnare her in a legal quagmire. No more deception, backstabbing, or wondering about trusting her. Her absence also dealt a blow to the warders, who relied on her intellect and resources. The benefits of saving her? I couldn't think of any. Gwendolyn was no damsel in distress. She could take care of herself. But if she was in over her head, she had no one on her side to help drag her back above the surface. It's a situation I had seldom found myself in, but only because of people like Olivia, Thorn, Elizabeth, and even Malachi. Who knows what depths I might have fallen into if not for them? I sighed, because I knew I'd already made up my mind to find her. I kept the sample, stowing it away in a secret pocket. Outside, I watched drifting flakes of snow fall while I thought. Gwendolyn might not have allies, but she had employees, not the Black Blades. Captain Nelson was as useful as a dull knife, but I knew someone with the intelligence to help shed light on her possible abduction and the brawn to help free her. Given the late hour, I took a chance I'd find him at home rather than a fighting arena. I knew a shortcut, so a few alleys and blocks later, I stood before a 2-story tenement with faint illumination shining through the snow-dusted windows. Lowering my mask, I ascended the steps to the front door and knocked. Heavy footsteps within told me someone had heard me, so I folded my hands before me and waited. "Who the hell is it?" a gruff voice called from inside. "Something has happened, Raid," I said. "Ms. Goddard is missing. I need your help." The door swung open on well-oiled hinges, revealing a dwarf who was definitely not Raid, nor was she a man. "Kess Lendon, I presume?" I asked, remembering Raid's sister from the one time we'd met. "Yes, that's me," she said, her husky voice threatening to knock icicles loose. Kess shared her brother's dark hair, though hers cascaded in a long, intricate braid. Her sharp nose and wide, penetrating eyes exuded an air of keen intellect and insatiable curiosity. Tonight, her attire merged the comfort of an evening at home with the readiness for hard work. A plush night robe draped over her broad shoulders, fluffy slippers, and, incongruously, heavy leather work gloves stained and worn from countless hours of labor. She held a pair of iron tongs, suggesting a readiness for tasks unknown. "What's this about Ms. Goddard?" "Kess, who the hell is it?" Raid shouted from somewhere inside. "Like brother, like sister." "Perhaps if I can come inside?" I asked. Kess's gaze lingered on my armor and weapons, but she stepped back with the door held open. I stepped into the foyer, immediately finding myself greeted by Raid, who was dressed for neither sleep nor work in a simple tunic and breeches. Froth stained his thick, dark beard, and he held a long-handled axe equally suited to the battlefield, or dealing with intruders. "You," he said, not lowering his axe. "Apologies for disturbing you at such a late hour." Kess removed her gloves. He said, "Ms. Goddard is missing." "That right?" Raid eyed me up and down. "You have anything to do with it?" "Not this time. I just came from Miss Goddard's private laboratory." Raid eyed me suspiciously. "The laboratory no one is supposed to know about?" "That's the one," I said, crossing my arms. "Nothing is that hard to find if you know where to look, which is actually why I'm here. Someone broke into the lab after they killed the guards outside. Ms. Goddard's assistants are dead too. I saw no sign of Ms. Goddard, alive or dead." I said nothing about the energy sample because it seemed to have no bearing on the current situation. Shifting his axe to a one-handed grip, Raid wiped the froth from his beard. "Who do you suspect?" "I came here to ask you the same question." Raid chewed his lip, thinking. "The warders." I shook my head. "I helped Ms. Goddard with something related to the warders earlier this evening. She was in the middle of performing an analysis for them. They didn't do this." "Then what about the Jakaree?" Kess asked. "A possibility," I said. "But why?" Raid kept chewing his lip, looking remarkably like someone who knew something but wasn't sure he should tell me. Kess agreed. "Damn it, Raid," Kess huffed. "You look like your head's about to explode. Out with it already. Might as well tell him." I glanced from one to the other, waiting. Raid brandished his axe at his sister. "You know I wasn't supposed to say anything, Kess." "Too late for that now, isn't it? Besides, given the circumstances, I don't think Miss Goddard will mind. And best point that thing somewhere else unless you want it cleaved halfway up your arse." Sighing, Raid lowered his axe so the head touched the floor. "The Jakaree probably took her." "Probably?" Raid scratched his head. "The Jakaree took her. I'm sure of it. Did you see a device in the laboratory? About 3 feet tall, a lattice shell around parallel energy conduits topped with a harmonizing crystal sphere?" "You mean a Tillwood device?" I asked. "A what?" "Oh, that's what the cranes are calling it, aren't they?" "Yes, I meant a Tillwood device. Ms. Goddard got tired of trying to retrieve the design for her old one, so she designed and built a new one. She said she had so much time to think about it, she came up with a better version anyway. I know the cranes built one based on the old specifications and that they tried to keep it secret, but Ms. Goddard knew about it the moment they turned it on. So much for the shielding the cranes had implemented." Raid went on. "Whatever Remy and Ruby built is a prototype at best. This one's the genuine article. No energy degradation over time or leakage. Turn it on, and it'll increase any generator's power output indefinitely. Or if you need a massive surge for a shorter period, it'll do that too." "Except for one thing you aren't telling him, Raid," Kess said, a peevish look on her dwarven face. "Ms. Goddard's generator ain't finished." "But it's close," Raid shot back. "I don't doubt she'll have it completed in no time, assuming she lives long enough." "Is that how you know the Jakaree abducted her?" I asked. "They were after the machine?" "Aye," Raid said. "A week ago they tried buying the design." Raid chuckled. "They offered a fair price, but Ms. Goddard told them to take their offer and shove it. Her creation is worth far more than mere coin." Kess jutted her chin. "And that's coming from a dwarf, so you know it means something." The Jakaree had come to mind, of course, especially since the wounds the mercs had suffered aligned with Jakaree weaponry, but without a connection to Gwendolyn, I remained uncertain of their involvement. But I had a connection now. The Death Priests had tried once before to build a Tillwood-like device, even stealing the Artificer's plans to help with that endeavor. Raking the fingers of one hand through his beard, Raid asked, "But where would they take her?" "They've taken over one of the old temples," I said, knowing this, because I like to remain aware of my enemies. Raid lifted his axe and slapped the head into an open palm. "Then that's where we'll look. Kess, fetch your armor. I'll get my gauntlets." "Wait," I said. "Something doesn't seem right. You said the Jakaree tried to make a legitimate offer for the machine, right? When was that?" 3 days ago. "Did you recognize their envoy?" Raid shrugged. I didn't see him, but I imagine he was just another tattooed priest like all the rest. Not helpful. So, I asked, when Gwendolyn refused, what did the Jakaree say? Placing his axe over a shoulder, Raid said, Ms. Goddard told me he was none too happy. She had black blades with her, so the priest wasn't about to try anything stupid. He gave her an ultimatum. Time to reconsider and all that. How much time? Raid looked up, thinking. I think she said 5 days. 5 days, I said. So, why return in force 3 days later? They got tired of waiting? Kess posed. Or something changed, Raid added. Maybe they couldn't wait any longer. Both were plausible explanations, but I had a third in mind. I need an hour, I said. An hour for what? Raid asked. To properly sort this out. You think someone else took Ms. Goddard? Raid asked. No, I'm sure the Jakaree did. It's more of a question of which ones. Why does that matter? I shook my head, thinking. It may not. Or it may mean everything. Both dwarves stared at me in confusion. I can't explain right now. But if I'm right, we may have more than the Jakaree to deal with. The death priests have aligned themselves with a blood witch. I've crossed paths with her a time or two. One of those times, it took another witch to fight her off. The other times, I got lucky. Raid grunted. I think I know that other witch. Matilda's her name, right? That's right. Matilda's made herself hard to find, but that's why I have this. I shrugged the depleter crossbow from my shoulder. Raid let out a whistle. Nice piece of machinery there. Can I take a closer look? He held his hands out, fingers grasping with eagerness, so I handed the bow over. He examined the weapon from top to bottom. When he was finished, he let out another whistle. That's a damn fine piece of machinery indeed. Oak stock, steel fitting, and a precision-crafted trigger mechanism. But this right here makes the weapon. A high-intensity luminar crystal charged with arcane energy, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm not. Pull the trigger, and the luminar discharge fires a bi-directional energy stream. A conductive loop, if you will, with the returning stream tied to the containment vessel. Raid eyed me sharply. You're planning to drain the witch's magic, aren't you? More than that. Hopefully her life, too. He handed the crossbow back to me. Kess crossed her arms. But what happens if you miss? I don't intend to miss. No one ever does, she said. What do you think, Raid? Think we can help out if the bow doesn't do the trick? Raid humphed. We're the best combat engineers this side of Shantywall, so I hope so. Is 1 hour enough time? I asked. They both shrugged, but Raid said, It'll have to be. We agreed on a place to meet, and then I left. The engineers had their work cut out for them, and so did I. Snow blanketed the night-dark avenues. Street lanterns, which had guided me this far, shone no longer once I passed into the temple district. The world didn't have a use for gods anymore, so why fill streetlights with oil when no one ventured this way other than vagrants, beggars, and tattooed death priests? I crunched through the snow for a block, with the picked-over, snow-blanketed ruins of minor temples rising on either side, when I felt eyes on me. Sequestered in deep shadow, the priests did nothing more than observe my passing, though I imagined calloused hands settling on dagger hilts and gazes narrowing as they wondered what I was about, trespassing like I was. I made no effort to hide my presence. On the contrary, I stayed in the middle of the street, with my arms lifted and hands empty. I'm here to talk to Onius, I announced into the darkness, stopping when a thick-robed priest, his bald head and face marked with the distinctive geometric Jakaree tattoos, emerged ahead of me. This one held a torch, which he lifted high to take the measure of me. Though armed, the lanky priest kept his weapons sheathed. I took that as a good sign. Come with me, the priest said, turning without bothering to see if I followed. We traversed several blocks before turning toward a temple worse off than the others we'd passed. Only one wall of the original structure remained. Piles of debris spoke to the condition of the others. We walked around the remaining wall, stopping at a wide hole in the ground with stone steps leading down into the void. My escort whistled, a practiced pattern met by heavy footfalls coming up the stairs. Soon, Another priest joined the first. "Come with me," this new one also said. The other blended into the darkness to return to his station. Once more, I followed, descending into the underground, where the path was at least snow-free. Here, lanterns strung up along either wall provided more than sufficient light to guide us, or to allow a priest, many of whom we passed, to stab me in the back. But though I couldn't rule out an attempt on my life, I had to believe that here, where Onias's influence was at its strongest, I was as safe as possible, even with so many Jakaree surrounding me. "Wait here," my second escort said. Through an archway and from a voluminous chamber lit by half a dozen cooking fires, the delicious aroma of food cooking engaged my senses. Fires spotted the darkness, their light illuminating death priests preparing food, stirring pots or gathered together in small rings emitting murmurs of conversation. It surprised me to see Jakaree engaged in such ordinary activities, but I supposed everyone must eat and eat well if the sizzle of meat was any indication. Intrigued, I ignored my escort's instructions and waded into the smoky room. Plenty of hateful stares looked back at me, but not all. A woman, only the second Jakaree female I'd seen other than Lyra, offered me a slight nod, which I returned. She tended a cooking fire, dashing a sizzling platter with garlic as she shook the tray's contents. Like Lyra, her head remained unshaven, her hair short and chestnut brown. She also had none of the geometrically shaped tattoos. Past her I saw another woman, this one sharing cooking duties with a teenage boy, already shaved and tattooed like the adult men. Only the men bore the characteristic baldness and black and white symbols on their skin, or so I thought until I saw a woman who shared the male distinction. One of the circled gatherings proved a storyteller's ring, with one priest waving hands while telling tales as the others listened with rapt attention. Still, another, with half a dozen priests, featured a game of chance, bone dice shaken, then tossed across the floor. A collective groan, a universal sign the throw was not good, followed. I'd gone far enough away from my designated corner, so I stopped, observing an elderly woman wrapped in a blanket, sitting before an enormous fireplace, before a voice I recognized drifted in through the lazy smoke. "You find the situation perplexing, do you not?" I turned to face Onias, head priest of the Jakaree, his face lit by a smirk so pronounced it tilted the geometric configuration on one side of his face. He remained as I remembered him, a lithe, muscled figure, a stern gaze, and the most prominent of his tattoos, a black sun emblazoned right on his forehead, so dark it seemed to absorb every bit of the room's sparse light. His voice wasn't silky smooth, but neither was it laced with the roughness of gravel. But his tone was deep and husky, as if every word rose from deep within and carried the weight of his soul. He wore a simple beige homespun tunic, breeches, and closed-toe sandals. A wool blanket frayed at the edges covered his shoulders. "Perplexing how?" I asked. Onias came to stand next to me. I don't think I'd ever been this close to the man unless we were trying to kill one another. Surprisingly, along with the musky odor of sweat, I also smelled a hint of lilacs. "You expected to see dark priests chanting while making heinous sacrifices to our god," Onias said, still smirking. "Instead, you see people, families even, going about their lives like anyone else, cooking, eating, conversing with one another. No chanting or bloody sacrifices here." "Not yet," I wanted to say. Instead I said, "I'll admit, seeing women and children." I failed to keep the surprise from my voice as two young girls and a boy ran into the chamber, laughing, smiling, and playing a game that looked like Keep Away or some close variation. The boy I spotted earlier was a teenager. These newcomers were adolescents, maybe 6 or 7, though I had little experience with such things, so I couldn't be sure. Onias chuckled. "Yes, children." Clapping his hands once, Onias spoke in a voice gone harsh. "Paru, Lel, Ked, come here at once." Men in battle could not deny the high priest, so how could 3 small children? The trio stopped before their leader and stood at military attention. Onius placed his hands on his hips. Each of your mothers has warned you about such behavior, haven't they? He asked with a growl. No response other than plenty of squirming. Onius bent at the waist to lean closer. I know they did because I was there. Yes, High One, the children replied in unison. Onius straightened. Now, what is it you are doing wrong? Tell me quickly. We're not supposed to run so close to the fires, they said together, though each had a different variation, so the words emerged in a jumbled mess. Onius glared at them a moment longer before dropping to a knee. When he spoke, his harsh tone softened, making me realize his sternness was a ruse. That's right, young ones. It's too dangerous. There are plenty of other places to play. Now, go wash up. It's almost supper time. As one, the children fled, off to do as their patron ordered. Onius stood and sighed. Children, what can you do with them? You have any of your own? I asked, genuinely curious. These were not the Jakaree I'd come to know, so I wondered if the high priest might have a surprise or two of his own. But Onius shook his head. No, he said with some sadness. My path has always led in a different direction. It is a path we share now, as you've said many times. Yet still, you do not believe me. He wasn't asking, so I didn't answer. I'm here to make sure a debt was paid, I said. Oh? Onius asked, lifting a brow in my direction. And to ask a question? I am intrigued on both counts, the high priest said. But first, let us move closer to the fireplace. The outside cold seeps into this room like we've entered the shadow realm itself. The high priest settled us at the fire where the elderly woman sat. Her head turned our way, but the hood of her robe concealed all but the hint of frailty in the form of graying hair and parched skin before she looked away. You spoke of a debt, Onius said. You sent Matilda to Finrad's tower to free a high priestess of yours. Yes, the witch repaid her debt to me in full. Then Lyra made it home? Though I had peered through the smoky room for her, I failed to locate her thin figure and platinum hair. I hoped she had. Onius tilted his head. Tell me, what happened? I thought she died, I said as plainly as I could. She may have thought the same. A priest of yours, Scaraman, betrayed her. She sacrificed herself so I could escape the tower. For that, I owe her. Pity she isn't here to collect, Onius said, looking toward the elderly woman whose fire we shared. The woman stirred, straightening in her chair, rickety joints slow to respond. Flickering light from the fire danced across the hint of a weathered face. Her fingers, gnarled like the roots of an ancient tree, trembled as her hands lifted to pull back her hood. Even that seemed to take an extraordinary effort, her movement so slow I considered helping her. But Onius remained still, so I did the same, waiting as the fabric finally slipped away to reveal Lyra's shock of hair and icy blue eyes. The whispering shade decreed that you must live, assassin. So I acted, the woman who was Lyra yet not Lyra said. I remembered her as an alluring woman with porcelain skin, demure lips, and short hair blaring from her head like the whitest of winter storms. She spoke and moved with confidence because of the power she wielded. This woman, in comparison, was a crinkled caricature. Her white hair had gone gray, her smooth skin tired and old. Where before her slender fingers had cast powerful magic, now they were shriveled and bent. Yet, despite her outward appearance, when I peered into those icy blue eyes, which might be the one thing that hadn't changed about her, I knew without a doubt that this was her. But if you think you are in my debt, I will accept that, and perhaps call on you when I am in need. Anytime, I said, because I thought of nothing else to say. Lyra shifted in her chair, pulling her robe and the blanket over that tighter. It is so cold. Onius raised a hand to a nearby woman, who brought another blanket that she carefully placed over Lyra. The stricken priestess sank into her chair, letting the blanket envelop her. When she closed her eyes, I knew she had nothing more to say. It is good you have come, Onius said. there is something I have wished to speak to you about." I waited for him to go on. "Some time ago, Utet escorted you to a temple. He showed you the way of things." "I remember. I also remember your underling trying to kill me. More than once, in fact. Utet is actually the second reason I'm here." "Oh?" The more time I spent in the Jakaree's sanctuary, the more it seemed Onius had nothing to do with Gwendolyn's abduction. Though I wanted to ask to rule out the possibility, I also recognized the decorum here. I was in the high priest's home as a guest, and he raised the subject of the underground temple first. Besides that, I needed to tread carefully. Accusing the priests of kidnapping someone would not win me any favors, especially if they had nothing to do with it. "So," I said instead, "my question can wait. You mentioned the temple." Onius paused, gathering his thoughts. Other than the crackle of the fire and murmured conversation heard above the clatter of food being doled into wooden bowls, silence settled between us. While I waited for the high priest to continue the discussion, I reviewed my memories of the temple. The wall paintings told a simple story of good versus evil. Dark priests and chivalric knights meeting in a contest from which only one survived. But if what Utet had said was true, those dark priests were not the Jakaree. "The Jakaree are not an ancient order," he told me. "This temple predates the fall of the old gods. The knights represented the greater revelation of the two because the warders belonged to that ancient order. Pity the knights hadn't died out along with those ancient priests those many centuries ago, because then no warders would plague my city today." "One of the paintings in the temple depicted a dragon," I said to Onius, who lifted a brow at my statement. "I saw the warders forging scales in a foundry. Later, an associate and I discovered them, refining an alchemical solution that had the appearance of blood. Throw in the heart of the dragon, and it's hard to miss the pattern." Onius folded his hands before him. "A friend told me Alchester isn't the first battleground you and the warders have chosen. How long have you been fighting one another? Years? Decades?" I shook my head. "Never mind. That doesn't matter. However long it's been, you must know a great deal about them." Onius nodded knowingly. "We have learned much about our enemy over the generations." "Generations? Their conflict extended far longer than I suspected. Then you must know what they're building." "As you said, isn't it obvious?" "Obvious, maybe, but believable." "Believe whatever you like," Onius said. "That does not alter the reality of the situation. Soon the conflict between us will come to an end. At long last, the Dark One will gain a foothold in this world, and his reign of everlasting darkness will begin." I frowned. "Sounds very apocryphal. Why the rush to end things? If you've been fighting for as long as you say, what's another millennia or two?" "I do not decide these things," Onius said. "Nor do the warders. The unifying convergence is almost upon us, and there is nothing anyone can do to stop it. Once the celestial bodies align and the veil between worlds is thinnest, we will ignite the horizon dichotomizer, and the Dark One will be free forever." The high priest's expression turned sour. "Only one thing can stop this from happening." "Let me guess," I said. "The dragon." "Yes, but not in the way you think." I waited for him to explain. "You know, we have initiated multiple attacks on the warders," he said, "but they seldom, if ever, reciprocate against us." I wouldn't know, so I took his word for it. "The warders have always thought in traditional terms. We are their enemy, and, as one might expect, one achieves victory against an enemy by wiping them out. But since coming to Alchester, their tactics have changed." "Changed how?" I asked. "Now they no longer seek to stop us, but to stop the convergence itself." A servant's arrival carrying 2 wooden cups interrupted the high priest. The servant bowed, then held 1 cup out to each of us. Onius took his without hesitation. I followed suit. "Honeyed wine," Onius said, drinking. "I apologize for not providing refreshments sooner." I waved his apology away. By habit, I sniffed my cup, noting the delicate sweetness and thin viscosity as I swirled the contents. Without further ceremony, I drank. Sweet wines were not my favorite, but as the wine slid down my throat, I couldn't help but nod my approval. That's good. Onius affected a thin smile. Our vintners have limited resources, but they are expert fermenters. They use an age-old metheglin recipe handed down through the generations. I raised my cup. My compliments to them. I will pass it on, Onius said. I wonder, though, you drank without hesitation. Did you not fear poison? Under any other circumstances, perhaps, I said. But as strange as it may sound of all the people here, I think you may be the one person I trust not to kill me. Onius chuckled. Trust is a delicate thing, is it not? So that is good to hear. Trust me when I say the warders no longer wish to destroy the Jakaree by direct means. Instead, they mean to destroy us by destroying your city. You see, the unifying convergence is more than celestial bodies moving through the heavens or the moon's alignment or even the specific time it is to occur. Most vital is its location, which is not as precise as, say, a specific house or temple or even a neighborhood. The location of convergence is Alchester, and beneath it, Chorus. The warders mean to stop the unifying convergence by destroying your entire city, assassin, and they will use the dragon to do it. The wine did little to assuage the sinking feeling in my stomach. How long? Soon. The unifying convergence will occur on midwinter's night. Winter solstice, or thereabouts, in other words, roughly 6 weeks from now. I mentioned the heart of the dragon, I said. The warders have it. It's the latest piece in their puzzle. Maybe the last, but they're having difficulty harnessing its energy. Onius drank. My engineers suspected as much. Something to do with a spike in ambient noise, Partagon tells me. We have known of the heart for some time, but its purpose remains a mystery. Partagon discovered the heart's frequency in our ancient lore, so he is attempting to program an encoder to act as a detection device. If we know the heart's location, we will try to stop the warders. The work, however, goes slowly. Though I carried the energy sample, which I didn't doubt might prove invaluable to their effort, I said nothing about it. For all Onius's overtures, he remained as much an enemy as the warders. You tried to purchase a device from the Society recently, I said. Specifically, you sent someone to speak to the Society's chief scientist, Gwendolyn Goddard. Onius tilted his head. His mouth was open, about to ask how I knew about that, but he closed it just as readily. It didn't matter how I knew, I suspected he thought. But since I did, he saw no reason not to confirm it. Ms. Goddard refused our offer. Why make an offer at all? Why not just steal it? Onius looked down his nose at me. We are not thieves. You stole the original plans from me, didn't you? The high priest continued to stare at me, his expression softening as he accepted the truth of it. We did indeed. But stealing is a last resort. When other avenues are open, I prefer to explore them. Much like you, the Jakaree live in the shadows out of necessity. It does our continued existence no good if we call unwanted attention to ourselves. While a simpler approach may have been to take the machine from Miss Goddard, I deemed such an act too risky. She is a well-respected member of the scientific community, and, if rumors are true, has the ear of the king, or at least his advisors. We do not need that sort of trouble. Besides, you know what happened the last time we stole something of significance. It had led to no end of entanglements for everyone involved, so I saw his point. Then tell me, I said, choosing my words carefully, why did unwanted abduct Ms. Goddard and take the machine? Confusion, which seemed genuine, transformed into anger. How do you know this? The high priest asked, the hand holding his cup tightening around it until I thought it might shatter. I told him what I found in Gwendolyn's laboratory, along with what I didn't find. 2 dead scientists and 3 guards, and a prototype of the machine missing along with its creator. Ms. Goddard is working with the warders, so it wasn't them. You gave Ms. Goddard 5 days to change her mind, so unless you got impatient, who else besides unwanted might have done this? Onius's rising anger seethed with the crackling fire until he shot up, his face flushing the deep crimson of an unsettling storm, to hurl his wooden cup into the fire. The rest of his wine splashed across the floor. Surveying the room, the priest's dark eyes flared with fury, sharp enough to draw a gasp from those closest. Mothers gathered children closer, and heads ducked lest they attract their leader's ire. At that moment, their high priest was not a figure of mere divinity, but a volatile force, ready to unleash his wrath upon anyone who contested him. I downed the remainder of my drink and stood, hoping I wasn't making myself into a target. Like it or not, Au-Utet defied you again. The one question remaining is what you intend to do about it. Onius contained himself only with tremendous will. Still, he was no less angry as he glared at me. This is a matter for the Jakaree to solve. You may go. I crossed my arms. It's not that easy. Your lieutenant has Ms. Goddard. I need her to finish an ongoing project for me. She can't do that if she's dead. Au-Utet will not kill her, Onius said, sounding sure. Maybe he won't, I said, but he's working with a blood witch. People have a knack for ending up dead around her. Au-Utet will not let any harm befall her. As I understand it, Ms. Goddard's prototype is incomplete. She remains safe until it is finished. I wasn't so sure, but I was running up against my hour before I needed to meet Raid and Kess. All other things aside, I only needed to know where to find Au-Utet. But if Onius knew, would he tell me? He might, but not for nothing. I'll make you a deal, Onius. I want Ms. Goddard returned safely. If I can guarantee you'll get a copy of the plans for her new generator, will you tell me where to find her? You ask me to betray my own, Onius stated flatly. I'm asking you to allow me to teach him a lesson. The high priest no longer glared at me. His gaze was somewhere else, scanning the chamber before he noticed his cup at his feet, which had bounced from the hearth after he threw it. He bent to retrieve it and stood. That lesson must come from me and me alone, which is why I cannot tell you where to find him. But I can take you there. I don't think... A copy of the plans, and I will escort you to where I believe Au-Utet is holding Ms. Goddard. Those are my terms. In this, Onius held all the cards. The urgency of the situation was all on my side, with Gwendolyn's life in the balance. I could refuse his offer and go my way, but if that was a possibility with any chance at success, I wouldn't have come here in the first place. So I did the only thing I could do. I damned the consequences and accepted. I already recruited 2 others, I told him. They want to help with the witch. Onius grunted but said nothing, shouting to others to ready his weapons and armor. Soon enough, he donned dark banded armor and held a studded mace. I am ready, he pronounced. Only you? I asked. In this, I need no one else, he said, his earlier anger returning, or maybe it had never left. The Lendens waited for our arrival at the designated street corner. As expected, all hell broke loose when Onius joined us in the street lamp's halo of light. While flurries of snow swirled around us, I explained the situation, including how I promised to give Onius a complete copy of the engineering schematics for Gwendolyn's new device in exchange for his help. Raid grumbled about that, but he soon realized, as I did, we had no choice in the matter. With that out of the way, and the dwarves over their initial disgruntlement at Onius's participation, we got down to business. I see you've both come prepared, I said, eyeing their weapons and choice of armor. Right away, I recognized I made the right choice, asking for their help. Ordinary dwarves, with their meticulously crafted armor and finely honed weapons, were impressive in their own right, embodying the traditional strength of their mountains and forges. However, Raid and Kess stood apart. They were technologists and combat engineers of extraordinary repute, celebrated throughout the city for their ingenuity in crafting exotic armaments that transcended mere functionality. Their current ensemble was a striking testament to their reputation. Raid thumped his breastplate. Plate armor forged from pure Empyrean celestium and further hardened with a unique alchemical mixture. The runes? I asked. Symbols arranged in neat patterns adorned the armor's surface. Dwarven battle runes, Raid said, offering little more than that. Most might think plate armor enough. Not Raid, who took no chances this evening, complementing his armor with a helmet and a circular shield embossed with runes matching the ones on his breastplate. I recognized his pile drivers, his magically or technologically enhanced gauntlets, from before. Raid added to his arsenal with the double-edged battle axe he brandished at me back at the house. Now, the polished head gleamed almost like a spectral thing under the pallor of the overhead light. Crystals embedded in its edge I hadn't noticed before flickering every time a tiny snowflake landed on the weapon's edge. He had fastened a sleek pulse weapon to his belt, its body crafted from a blend of dark, matte-finished metal and shimmering accents of an unknown alloy with a handle tailor-made for his meaty grip. At the heart of the weapon, a translucent energy chamber pulsed with a bright emerald hue, revealing swirling patterns of energy that danced excitedly. Next to her brother, Kess emanated a different kind of power. Where Raid exuded bulkiness and brutality, Kess was all about light movement and dexterity, her armor a supple weave clinging to her muscled form that made no sound as she shifted from one foot to another. I recognized the arrow-repulsing armor from when the pair had demonstrated its protective properties to a ballroom full of society guests. She gripped a warhammer bearing many of the same dwarven runes as Raid's axe and had a crossbow slung over her shoulder. Given everything else I'd seen, I doubted the weapon was conventional. The stock was polished dark wood, and the metal appeared similarly well-conditioned. Last amongst her weaponry, and the most intriguing, a bandolier laden with grenades crisscrossed her chest. Besides a triggering pin at the top, the body of each explosive was a different color, which I realized upon closer inspection were different alchemicals inside containers of clear glass or similar material. "You said you needed help with a blood witch," Kess said, patting her array of grenades. "So we tried to cover every angle." I remembered Inspector Wright's grenade, and how he had identified the Progressive Society as its source. I didn't doubt the Lendons had a hand in supplying the Ministry of Justice with such advanced explosives. "You are all welcome to do what you will to the witch," Onius said, "but leave Au-Utet and the other Jakaree to me. Their punishment is mine to deliver." Onius took point, leading us halfway across the city, it seemed, until I got a sense of our destination. The Shambles, which in hindsight made perfect sense given Au-Utet's alliance with Isadora. Like a skilled predator, the witch thrived on the vulnerable and the unwary. The Shambles, with its shadows and secrets, was a rich hunting ground filled with both. Whispers of the vampire stalking the district's dimly lit back alleys had spread like a contagion, growing more vibrant with each retelling in taverns all across the city. I had observed such narratives firsthand, watching as drunken patrons leaned in closer, their eyes filled with awe and fear, while bards shared stories of the unfortunate souls who crossed her path in the darkness of night. Each story mixed fascination and dread, portraying Isadora as a nightmarish siren who lured the curious into the depths of her darkness. No one other than myself had peered into that darkness and lived to tell the tale, so while that qualified me to understand the extent of her wickedness, it provided no assistance locating her. The Shambles had too many hidden nooks and crannies, dark and twisting alleys, and cobweb-infested hidey holes where she may have set up her lair. Yet Onius guided us without missing a step, leading us deep into the district until it became evident he knew Isadora's exact location because he had visited her there before. When I questioned him about it, he said only, "In this, the Dark One guides me." Deeper and deeper we went until I was sure we had entered a forgotten part of town, one I knew I'd never laid eyes on before. From the looks of it, I doubted many others had either. The snow-covered streets and alleys lay undisturbed and devoid of life. Darkness shrouded the windows of buildings looming around us, while the absence of street lamps left us in an unsettling gloom. Other than the wind howling through the recesses between deserted structures, the only sound was the crunch of our footfalls on the fallen snow. "We are here," Onius said, unceremoniously stopping before a dilapidated storefront tucked away between two crumbling edifices. This was an apothecary's abode, before Isadora killed the woman and took possession of it. If Utet perpetrated the abduction of Miss Goddard, then he brought her here. Amidst the swirling snowdrifts, the shop's entrance loomed dark and uninviting. A creaking sign, its imagery a silver crescent moon and a bubbling cauldron faded with time, hung above a wooden door pockmarked with rot and framed by warped wooden beams betraying years of neglect. A fragile herb wreath, its dried flowers dusted with frost, hung on the door, the whispering wind releasing the faint scent of lavender and rosemary into the icy air. Soft flakes settled on the moss and creeping vines that clung to the weathered walls, while inside, candlelight flickered behind leaded glass windows, casting ghostly shadows on the snow-laden cobblestone street. Leather under Raid's mail creaked as he shifted from one foot to the other. If not for the light, I'd say no one has lived here in a long time. "It is the witch's magic, which rots and perverts all," Onius said. Kess let out a sigh of apprehension, but she raised her hammer, ready to get on with it. "What's the plan? Do we knock, or do we smash the door down?" In the next second, it didn't matter because the door creaked open of its own volition. "So much for the element of surprise," I said, whipping my long knives from their sheaths. Onius raised his studded mace and Raid his battle axe. We fanned out, waiting and wondering what might come from inside the shop. No one expected a red mist except for me. "It's Isadora," I said. Billowing forth from the open doorway thick and heavy, the mist blanketed the cobblestones in a hue resembling fresh blood spilled upon the earth. Wisps curled into the air, tendrils reaching out so it seemed the very shadows retreated from their touch. Where falling snow pierced that gaseous cloud, white turned to crimson, the soft flakes melting into nothingness before touching the ground. As the fog continued billowing out, ominous laughter echoed from within the miasma, sentient and chilling, reverberating like the tolling of a death knell. "So nice of you to drop by, my little assassin." Isadora's voice sounded from all places at once. As the smoky haze neared us, her laughter grew deeper, more resonant, echoing off the stone of the surrounding structures like distant thunder. The vapor coiled and twisted, swirling in a hypnotic dance, each tendril pulsing in rhythm with her dark mirth. Rich with malevolent pleasure, her disembodied voice wove through the crimson fog like threads of black silk. "I see you brought friends. How delicious of you." "Kess!" Raid yelled, backing from the approaching tendrils. "You waiting for an invitation or something?" But Kess was already in motion, removing a multicolored grenade from her bandolier. With practiced ease, she pulled the safety pin, cocked her arm for the throw, and tossed the explosive straight into the heart of Isadora's mist. The grenade exploded, but not in any way I'd ever seen. A concussive force sent a flash of light hurtling through the fog, but no sound accompanied the burst unless you counted Isadora's shrieking. The ear-piercing noise started at the mist's center and spread like a flash of light. Where it passed, the fog coalesced, darkened, and finally stopped moving, the tendrils grasping for us, freezing in place. Along with the mist's strange behavior, Isadora's wail quieted and soon fell silent. "That may not hold her for long," Kess said. "So throw another," I suggested. I considered using the depleter crossbow, but what did I shoot when I saw nothing but suspended crimson mist? Shaking her head, Kess said, "That type of grenade is gas-responsive only. With the mist solidifying, it won't have the same effect. We could try something more explosive, but unless we place a device deep inside the mist, impossible now, the way it's becoming solid, it won't do anything more than superficial damage. Same for your crossbow. Better save that for when it can really do some damage." Kess knew her business, so I didn't press. Besides, if the effect was only temporary, we didn't have time to sit idle. But with the front door blocked by the solidifying mist, we needed another way inside. I gestured at the window. Kess made quick work of it with her hammer. "Seems I'm having to do everything this evening," she said, knocking the last of the glass from the panes. "I suppose you all want me to go inside first, too?" I was already climbing through. "No, I'll go." Inside, the air was dense with an earthy scent. and shadows seemed to absorb the flickering light from candles struggling to penetrate the oppressive gloom. Still, I saw rough-hewn shelves sagging under the weight of countless glass jars and vials lining the walls. Some of the vessels glowed with an eerie luminescence, while others were murky, housing dark liquids alive with malevolence. Dried herbs hung from the ceiling in tangled clusters, their faded colors hinting at forgotten spells and long-dormant magic, while the faint rustle of their crinkled leaves echoed like whispers. A message from the prior owner, trying to tell me of her murder at Isadora's hands or something else? At the room's center, a heavy wooden table, scarred and worn from years of use, bore the marks of countless experiments. An ancient grimoire lay open on it, its pages yellowed and frayed, spell-laden text curling at the edges as if eager to escape. Shadows flickered over the delicate script, and though I tried to read the scrawl, the sigils were indecipherable and seemed to shift and writhe under scrutiny besides. Beyond the book, potions bubbled and boiled in various beakers, vials, alembics, and retorts. An ancient herb chest, its surface adorned with intricate carvings of twisting vines and whimsical flora, lay at the table's far end. Someone had left many of its tiny drawers open, their contents spilled across the table and onto the floor. In the farthest corner, a small hearth held remnants of long-extinguished flames, the ashes whispering of warmth long since faded from this place. Stepping away from the book, a prickle of awareness crept up my spine as I sensed unseen eyes watching from the shadows. But whatever the creatures were, they remained hidden, frightened of my intrusion, or perhaps wary of the dark power thrumming within this cursed place, their presence here as unwilling as my own. I stayed clear of the entry, where Isadora's cloud of crimson vapor hung heavy and thick, an impotent force for now. But for how much longer? As far as I could tell, no one else was here. Returning to the broken window, I signaled to the others that all was clear. Onius climbed through first, scanning the apothecary's gloom with a measured gaze. His face soon contorted in revulsion. "This place reeks of foulness." "Never thought I'd hear such words from your kind," Raid said, coming in next. "But I don't disagree with you." Past the mishmash of witch and apothecary paraphernalia, I spotted a back door. Dark lacquered wood fit the mood of the dower shop, but the triplicity of locks barring it smacked of something someone wanted kept secret, like an abducted chief scientist. I gestured at Raid to join me there. "I could pick these locks, but I think you might have a faster way to open this door." Raid handed his axe to his sister, then activated his piledriver gauntlets. Their soft azure glow flared to life with his first punch. The door bounced half off its hinges in response. A second strike finished it off. Beyond the smashed door, a narrow stair descended into a pit of darkness. "You three go," Kess said. "I'll keep an eye on the witch. If it looks like she's breaking free of the coagulant, I'll give a shout." An alchemical glow stick countered the darkness awaiting us down the stairs. With every step, the air grew more frigid, and a heavy, musty scent pressed on us like a weight on our shoulders, slowing movement and thought. My light revealed damp stone walls and a basement more spacious than expected, where only the faint sound of someone's wheezing breath broke the atmosphere's unsettling silence. I followed that sound across an uneven floor slick with moisture. Old wooden barrels, some toppled over, proved nothing more than minor obstacles, their strange contents of desiccated plants and husks of small reptiles spilled onto the ground. A series of rickety shelves lined one wall, sagging under the weight of dusty tomes bound in cracked leather and jars filled with liquids of vibrant yet unsettling colors. Like above, some glowed, illuminating the darkness with an eerie luminescence, while others contained swirling mists that roiled and shifted as if possessed by some unseen force. In the far corner, scattered tools littered an old workbench. Mortar and pestle, glass beakers, and sharpened blades, all stained with dried remnants of strange brews, potions, and blood? Vials lay smashed on the floor, their contents mingling in pools of vibrant, glistening hues. A faint whisper, a voice barely discernible, echoed from the shadows, guiding us around a bend. Lifting my light high, I peered through the inky dark, trying to locate the source of the noise. "Gwendolyn? Is that you?" No response, but then I no longer needed one because I found one of the people we sought. The person was not Gwendolyn. Thick with muscles and broad of shoulder, Ao Utet had a mental fortitude I'd often found indomitable, but to see him strapped to a table, his legs spread and his arms bound above his head, with cuts and slashes crisscrossing every part of him, did much to diminish my past remembrances. The Jakaree priest was only half conscious, but aware enough to shy from my light, dimming his eyes and looking away, but he also clenched his teeth, his jawline rigid as his entire body tensed. "Come back for more, witch," Ao Utet said in a halting whisper. "You can take all you want, but you will never break me." As I inched closer, the priest's eyes flickered with defiance, but his body betrayed him, his limbs convulsing against his restraints as he tried to withdraw further into the table. Even the strongest had their limits. Onius brushed past me in his urgency to reach his stricken brother. "Ao Utet, it is I, your guiding light." "Onius?" the burly priest croaked, crusted eyes blinking. "Onius!" While the high priest undid his brother's restraints, I walked around the table, stopping several paces later when I couldn't help but see the corpses piled one on top of the other. Next to me, Raid groaned. "Onius," I said, waiting for him to acknowledge what I'd found. Ao Utet stood only by the grace of his liege, so the pair arrived together, with the one leaning on the other. Onius had his lips pressed firm as his gaze wandered over the scene. 3 bodies, all Jakaree, stacked one on top of the other, each as pale as a white, and drained of every last drop of blood. Gwendolyn, alive or dead, remained absent. No one asked who had done this because we all knew. What we didn't know was why. "Forgive me, Onius," Ao Utet muttered, his breathing shallow and labored. The witch told us she sensed a coming conflict, that the meager energy she stole from the riffraff off the street would not sustain her. She took us so quickly. The others she drained right away. But she admired my strength, so desired to make it last the longest. She tried. His voice broke and he paused, taking a deep breath. No one faulted him, given what he had endured. "She tried to break me, but she did not." Onius gripped his brother tighter. "It is I who must ask for your forgiveness. I thought you had defied me. I never suspected you, and the others honored me with your bravery instead. Truly, the Dark One is with you." Onias's gaze drifted to the corpses. "I see 3 of our brothers, but you had a dozen with you. Where are the others?" "She took them," Ao Utet said, "but I know not where. Rest easy, brother. We will find them, but first let us leave this place." "But the witch—" "She is incapacitated." "Wait," I said. "What about Gwendolyn Goddard? Where is she?" Ao Utet's gaze narrowed at me, perhaps recalling the battles we'd fought against one another. I hoped he also remembered the times we'd fought side by side. Ao Utet may not understand the reason for my presence, but he shook off any hesitance and answered because even if he didn't trust me, he trusted Onius. "The witch took her, but not here." Raid emerged from an unexplored area of the basement. "I found the Goddard device. I suppose the witch wanted you to take that too." Ao Utet shook his head. "We took the machine to use for his greater glory." But before anyone said anything else, we heard Kess bellowing from the floor above us. Raid and I dashed for the stairs, leaving the priests to follow as best they could. We found Kess standing almost where we left her. But the solidified mass that was Isadora's essence had vanished. "The grenade's effect wore off quicker than I expected," Kess said. "By the time I realized she was free, it was too late to stop her from leaving." "Did she harm you?" Raid asked. Kess shook her head. Seemed in an awful hurry to get somewhere, though. Raid scratched his beard. "I wonder where." "She has another hideout," Ao Utet croaked, as he and Onius emerged from the stairwell. "She has the scientist there, a holy place of old, Strong with elder power, she said. Isadora means to extract every bit of knowledge from her. Her deep knowledge, the witch called it. To do this, she must perform a special ritual. Could she have also taken the other Jakaree there? I asked. It is likely, Utet said. Blood leaking from his many wounds stained the dark tattoos on his chest and arms. Where is this place? I asked. Utet took a breath and slowly removed his weight from his high priest until he stood using his faded strength alone. I will take you there. Onius reached out to him. No, my son. You are weak. Let me take you home so you can heal. But Utet shook his head and stumbled to a chest where armor and weapons awaited him. Grimacing in pain, he slipped on a leather hauberk and picked a studded mace resembling his high priest's weapon. He draped a heavy wool cloak over his shoulders. Moments later, his attention returned to Onius. Allow me to do this, High One, he said, the line of his jaw quivering. The witch betrayed me. She deserves to die by my hand. Onius placed his hand on the other's shoulder. We will do this together. Utet must have found hidden reserves of strength, because soon after leaving the apothecary, he pushed us at a pace we could scant match, leading us outside the snow-swept city to a place called the Echoing Grove. I'd heard of the grove, how it was an ancient place of worship at one time. But like so many holy places, no one came here anymore, so the once manicured walkways leading into the grove had become overgrown and hidden, ancient stones marked by runes covered over by thick vines, and lichen-stained statues once revered as the holy representation of one god or another, toppled long ago by the shifting of the earth. Towering ancient trees, their gnarled branches heavy with fresh powder, formed a sacred circle that seemed to hum with an otherworldly resonance. The air was hushed, muffled by the thick blanket of snow that dampened the usual sounds of the outside world, and smelled of damp earth mingled with the faint sweetness of pine. Ahead, inside the circle of trees, light from torches bobbed and danced like a host of will-o-wisps waiting for our arrival. We spotted wisps of crimson mist curling around the tree trunks, moving in time with the sound of chanting coming from within the grove, dispelling any notion that Isadora didn't also expect us. Better ready another grenade, Raid said to his sister. I didn't think Isadora would fall for the same trick twice, but it didn't hurt to try. We found an opening between the trees untainted by the witch's crimson mist and stepped into the glade. Immediately, we spread out. At the heart of the echoing grove lay an ancient circular altar, nothing more than a raised dais half buried in the snowfall. Made of smooth, time-worn stone, a layer of frost covered a surface etched with runes that glimmered in the dim light. At its center, Isadora, silent now, stood over Gwendolyn, who was bound and gagged. Ringing them at the circle's outermost edge were the 9 missing Jakaree priests, each standing at perfect military attention, arms at their side, and gazes forward and unwavering. Crimson mist and the falling snow swirled about each of them, the air of something sinister about them suggesting their presence here was not willing. Isadora moved around her captive with deliberate grace, her eyes taking us in individually but lingering the longest on me. I was no wizard, but even I sensed the darkness coiling around her. With a thin smile across her lips, the blood witch continued to pace around Gwen, whose panicked gaze found mine. If I could offer her some reassurance, I would. But all I could do was stare back until Isadora's presence demanded my full and undivided attention. "Come to kill me, have you?" Isadora taunted, her laughter echoing through the grove like a sinister melody. "I have, witch!" Utet roared as he rushed toward her. Isadora's laughter never stopped as an ensorcelled priest came between Utet and the witch. "Stand aside, brother," Utet said, coming up short. The one who stood opposite him continued staring ahead and said nothing. His eyes, though, flared a shade of red that matched the color of the mist. "They are mine now," Isadora said, "bound in spirit and mind." "Release them!" Onius yelled. "Or, by the Dark One, I will make you do so." Isadora rolled her eyes, her only response to the high priest's threat. Behind us, the crimson mist coiling around the grove's trees loosened its hold and began drifting toward us. As it did, it thickened and spread, closing off our escape. At the same time, Isadora's Jakaree descended from the dais and marched toward us. "We need to get Miss Goddard away from the witch," Kess said. "I can't risk using my grenades with her so close." I shrugged the depleter crossbow from my shoulder, taking aim, when I felt Kess's hand on my arm. "Not now," she said. "If you want to drain the energy of the magic all around us, then have at it. But if you want to kill the witch, better wait until we've subdued her. You only have one containment vessel. Once it's full, the weapon's done. Didn't whoever gave you the depleter explain how it works?" Cursing Jarek while grudgingly admitting a sorcerer-hunter's job was more difficult than expected, I put the crossbow away and instead drew my sword. "I'll free Miss Goddard. Once I do, hit Isadora with everything you've got." But Isadora had other ideas. She wasn't here to fight. She'd come to complete a ritual, and that's what she intended to do. One step was all I took before the crimson mist surged over us like a relentless tidal wave, swallowing everything in its path. Instantly, as the surge engulfed us, the world dissolved into an endless sea of swirling red. My allies vanished behind me, and both Gwendolyn and the witch were lost to the suffocating haze ahead. Never one for giving up easily, I kept moving. But the swirling mist obscured my senses until I found myself in a disorienting void, where I surrendered all sense of direction. Before me, the mist parted, inviting me closer. Another of Isadora's tricks, I figured, so I hung back, waiting, until a black tattooed visage burst into view as the Jakaree lunged at me with a katesh held high. Clang! I deflected the strike of his sword. As we parted, he dissolved back into the mist, which never stopped swirling and curling in on itself, flowing in such a way that even the hint of light in one direction shifted to appear from another. From a world away, the noise of a battle joined reached my ears. As the rhythmic chanting from earlier reverberated through the void once more, a second priest brandishing twin crysknives lunged at me. Though I relished a good knife fight, the priest seemed oblivious to the sword in my hand. As he thrust his blades forward, I stepped back, leveraging my longer reach to slice through his defenses and slash his chest to the bone. The mist again, roiling with anger this time, closed around the priest before I could see if I'd finished him. Though I knew Isadora meant to distract and keep us busy while she sucked every last drop of blood from her victim, the chanting sounding from every direction at once made it damn near impossible to determine its direction. I needed to find her now, before it was too late. "We played hide-and-seek once before, didn't we?" I shouted into the mist. "As I recall, you crawled away with a knife in the gut." The chanting continued unabated, but the mist's frantic vapors settled. Another priest emerged from the fog, his blade clashing against mine before disappearing back into the ether. "When you tried to take Eliza's blood at the slaughterhouse, she almost killed you, didn't she?" Slowing, thinning now, the chanting stopped, and Isadora's voice pierced the miasma. "The little brat won't get a second chance. When I find her and her mother, they will both drown in a sea of their own blood." A dwarven battle cry echoed from afar, followed by the whoosh of an energy weapon firing. "Tsk, tsk," I said. "That's no way to talk about family." "Silence, then," Isadora said. "So, she told you, though I doubt she told you everything." In fact, Matilda hadn't told me much at all about her relationship with Isadora, but the Blood Witch didn't need to know that. "Matilda told me enough," I said. "Did she?" Glimmers of anger tinged the witch's voice. With it, the mist thinned until I saw silhouettes, the others fighting with the errant Jakaree, moving through the tendrils. "Did she tell you of her betrayal? A sister should never turn on her own." "If you're sisters, I'm a goblin lord. You look nothing alike." Two priests circled my position, closing. "Family is more than blood sometimes. Once, we were true sisters in the same coven. The Bloodstone Coven." "Matilda, a blood witch?" "But Matilda betrayed me. She broke our sacred bond." "So, You're taking that out on her daughter? Yes, first her child and then her. They must both suffer for the wrong done to me. The priest continued circling, but slower now, one almost stopping to shake his head. Isadora's magic wearing off? Matilda took everything from me. She made my life a living hell. For that I will... The witch kept yammering. The nearest priests shook their heads and stared at the world around them in befuddlement. Noise from the battle at the perimeter had also faded. Meanwhile, as Isadora carried on, tallying her grievances now for all to hear, the mist thinned and thinned again until I spotted the altar with the witch and Gwen at its center. As I approached, Gwendolyn came into clearer view. Aside from some bruising across her cheek and blood crusted at her nose, she looked no worse for wear. Her expression, a mask of stoicism, was betrayed only by the tremble of her lip. She didn't see me, nor did the witch, who continued babbling into the void. Slowly, I removed the depleter from my shoulder. The thinning magic meant I had my opportunity now, so as I reached the altar's edge, I lifted the weapon and took careful aim. Isadora spun around, sheer delight lighting her features. Oh, come now. Did you really think it would be that easy? I pressed the trigger. I recognized my mistake too late, realizing I should have put the weapon in her face before activating it. As the trigger clicked, a Jakaree sprang between Isadora and me. Not a sorcerer, the priest had little energy to take, so the blast of depletion energy extinguished him like a flickering candle, drawing his life force into the containment vessel. Isadora cackled as the shriveled husk hit the ground, and her crimson mist regained its vibrancy, once more suffocating the grotto with its impenetrable cloud. But I was so close now that the witch could no longer hide from me. I stepped closer and fired again. Once more, a priest, shambling to the altar as if guided by a puppeteer, came between us and died. Next time, bring Matilda's little hellion with you, Isadora shouted. At least then you might have a chance. At the edge of the raised dais, I pulled the trigger. But the instant my finger squeezed down, Isadora ripped the crossbow from my grasp and sent the weapon hurtling into the crimson void. So I drew my sword, preparing to slash at the witch with such precision and speed she couldn't. Isadora ripped the blade from my hand. Want one more try before I kill you? Isadora asked. Reaching into a fold beneath my armor, I said, I have a better idea. I hurled the vial of Dragonheart energy at the witch's feet. What's... Isadora waved a hand trying to deflect her impending doom, but the vial was unexpected, and she was too late. Far too late. Shattering on impact, tendrils of vibrant energy erupted from the broken vessel, clawing upward like sinister fingers that twisted around the witch like the bars of a cage. More than holding her, the crimson streaks sliced through her skin, burrowing deeply to ignite a blaze within her very bones. The grotto filled with a haunting sound as Isadora's mouth widened in a scream, her primal cry resonating with the agony she felt as the energies consumed her. I swept past her, reaching Gwen and freeing her from her bonds. The second her hands were free, Gwendolyn tore the gag from her mouth and said with chattering teeth, "It's about damn time. I'm freezing." I yanked her to her feet. "A thank you will suffice." We ran, with me dragging Gwendolyn along when she stumbled. "That was about the dumbest thing you could have done," she said, stuttering from the cold. "You're lucky we're both still alive." Isadora let out a blood-curdling shriek, her body writhing as the raw energy ripped through her. It worked, didn't it? But for how long? I spotted the others through the dissipating mist. 2 of Isadora's Jakaree lay crumpled at Raid's feet. Meanwhile, Onius and Utet fended off 2 others, while Kess pushed another away with her hammer. A priest, his head smashed in, lay at her feet. Although the tide had shifted, Isadora's grip over her minions remained firm. Yet, with the witch now on her knees, racked by violent energy, how much longer could she maintain that control? "Wake up, brothers!" Onius yelled. Isadora's Jakaree kept on, unable to stop. "They do not hear you," Utet said, grunting as he deflected a blade before it disemboweled him. Better they die at our hands than continue to serve the witch. Better they join the Dark One in everlasting sleep than— Eh? What's this? The still living priests under Isadora's power stopped fighting. Those felled rose, standing still with their fatal gaping wounds on full display. Then, the skin of both the living and the dead changed color, shades of light and dark becoming a unifying crimson. "She's taken their blood!" Kess yelled. Minuscule droplets at first, so fine they formed a spray, exuded from the errant priests. But that soon became a full-fledged mist, tendrils lengthening and stretching toward the circle of the echoing glade. The tendrils joined, forming thickening branches that reached for Isadora. When the first tip of a branch touched her, her pitiful wailing lessened and stopped, and her expression turned from panicked desperation to teeth-baring rage. With her hand extended and fingers curled, I saw her lips moving, chanting the words to her bloodletting spell. We stood entranced, unable to act because what could we do? Even the dead had no refuge from the Blood Witch, as she leached their essence as easily as she did from the living. Cloudy tendrils of blood spiraled around Isadora like a grotesque dance as she regained her feet, her eyes blazing even as the dragon heart energy crackled around her still. But as she stole more of the priest's life force energy, drawing their combined essence into her own, her face twisted into a grimace of unholy triumph. Slowly, her power grew as the heavy metallic scent of blood and dark magic strengthened. The living priests' faces contorted in silent agony, their skin growing paler by the second. At the same time, their dead brothers stood like macabre puppets, who, even in death, represented bountiful vessels for Isadora's twisted harvest. The witch raised her arms and the blood mist responded, coiling faster, tighter, until it encircled her in a swirling vortex of crimson power. Kess removed a grenade from her bandolier. Desperate, she yanked the pin and hurled it straight into the bloody vortex. While the grenade still soared through the air, Kess grabbed her crossbow from over her shoulder, aimed and let loose, firing a bolt of energy that connected with Isadora at the exact moment the grenade exploded. The Blood Witch disappeared behind the blast, even as the concussive force of the explosion almost rocked us from our feet. Kess kept firing into the smoke, stepping closer with each bolt fired. Raid joined her, capping off his pistol. A priest to my left collapsed. With his blood and life force drained, the witch should have no further use for him. Except, moments later, his corpse shambled back to life. "Abomination!" Onius howled. Then the blast created by Kess's grenade melted away, revealing the Blood Witch, not blasted to smithereens as I hoped, but standing free of the dragon heart's energy, which must have finally dispersed into nothingness. Another priest collapsed, and another, until Isadora's bloody harvest was complete. But each of the stricken priests rose again, jerking, shambling, and falling in line with the others until all 12 stood against us. "We need to retreat," Gwendolyn yelled. "Eye to that," Raid said. "Kess, break off! We're leaving!" Kess kept firing, each energy bolt brushed off by the Blood Witch. "Kess!" Raid yelled again. But she either didn't hear or wasn't willing to give it up. I was closest, so I grabbed her by the shoulder. "I hear ya," she said, swatting me away. "But I'm keeping her occupied. Get Ms. Goddard and the others out of here. I'll hold her for as long as I can." I was of half a mind to leave Kess to her noble end, but this wasn't personal for her like it was for me, so I said, "Give me that negative energy grenade from your bandolier." "How did you—" "Prior experience. Make sure everyone gets out of here. I have something special in mind for Isadora." Kess spared me a glance. "Something that'll get you killed along with her?" She stopped shooting long enough to hand me the grenade. "Let's hope not," I said, "though I may wish I was dead if this doesn't work." Ao Utet appeared next to me. "Then perhaps we will die together, assassin. Whatever you have planned, I will remain by your side until it is done." I didn't know where such devotion came from until I saw the priest's gaze lingering on the risen dead. He failed them once. He did not intend to do so again. "This may be a one-way trip," I said. But he remained resolute, and I had no more time to convince him to go with the others. I looked back once to see Onius staring at us. With a grim expression, he nodded. Then, I had no more time to do anything other than focus on the witch. Kess retreated, firing as she went. Each shot eroded Isadora's defenses by fractional amounts, but I no longer cared about that. I had retrieved my sword, so with it grasped in one hand and the negative energy grenade in the other, I approached Isadora with Ao Utet at my side. Isadora laughed to see us. "Do it! Throw your weapon at me and learn how futile—" I stepped into the swirling vortex of Isadora's dark magic. At once, the energy took hold, battering into me. If not for Ao Utet's strength, I would have faltered. But the priest placed himself between me and the indomitable tide, allowing me to step clear and face the witch. "Who said anything about throwing it?" I asked her. Isadora's confidence melted into horrible fear when she saw I had already pulled the pin. In the next second, the grenade's energy enveloped us. Our world became a moonless night without stars, an unholy darkness, complete and absolute, and an abject cold that swept over me and brought Ao Utet to his knees. The Shadow Realm, which I hoped never to see again every time I visited it. Though now, for the first time, I didn't shun its embrace but let it wash over me. Its debilitating effects negated, so I felt nothing more than a slight chill. I couldn't explain the change, though I felt a strange feeling of comfort instead of the usual terror. If this was the Dark One's work, he extended no such inurement to Ao Utet, who collapsed, shivering and moaning as the cold pierced his bones. I remembered that feeling and pitied him for coming with me. What I'd done utterly shocked Isadora. Her eyes, wide with disbelief, her manic smile replaced by sheer astonishment as she registered the sudden shift in power between us. With a whimper, the swirling tendrils of her dark magic faltered and faded altogether, overcome by the real power here, the power of shadow. Gone was the unstoppable blood witch, the embodiment of dark desires and malevolence. In her place stood a woman grappling with the stunning realization she had lost. More than that, she was trapped. But then, so were we. Or so she must think. Isadora clenched her fists, her helplessness transforming into rage. "You fool!" she hissed, her voice cutting through a stillness so profound it seemed as if the world held its breath. "You've killed us both." For now she shared none of the usual symptoms of entering this accursed place. But for how long? Unlike the shadows, her magic wasn't infinite. "No, Isadora," I said, stepping back. Even that short distance created a void between us, and she almost faded from view, so dark was it. "Just you." I grabbed Ao Utet's arm, hauling him to his feet. He was so weak he had no choice but to lean on me. Damn, the priest was heavy, but I stumbled away from the witch without letting him go. We went as far as the grenade's blast perimeter, where I found Mason's doorstopper holding the way home open. The area beyond was as dark as the Shadow Realm itself, but I knew, hoped, the way out was there. "You think you can trap me here?" Isadora screamed, her voice sharp and laced with venom, but beneath it lay a tremor full of anxiety and fear. I risked a glance back, catching glimpses of the Blood Witch through the darkness as she lunged after us. With one final push, I hauled myself and the priest over the threshold, kicking the doorstopper away right before we crashed back into the glade. Disentangling myself from Ao Utet, I spun around, and only then, when I saw no trace of the doorway between worlds, did I settle back and sigh in relief. Isadora was gone, trapped forever, or so I hoped. Silence pervaded the echoing grove. With the witch gone, the Jakaree corpses had become corpses once more. I spotted the others beyond the trees, waiting to see if we somehow survived, or if the witch still needed killing. Next to me, Ao Utet shook with uncontrollable tremors. "You saved me," he stammered through chattering teeth. "Why?" "I'm not entirely sure. Not because of the code, which dictated a far harsher treatment of foes. Neither was it because I had any fondness for the priest, because I did not. However, he had chosen to accompany me when he could have stayed behind, so perhaps the reason was simply because he risked his life for mine. That kind of debt demands payment, so I was glad to have the score evened between us. The same went for Matilda. While I didn't owe her any direct favors, she had gone to great lengths to ensure my safety on multiple occasions, so maybe neutralizing the Blood Witch was a step towards repaying her. I needed to seek her out, or perhaps wait for her to find me, to inform her of Isadora's downfall, and that we no longer needed whatever resided within the Empyrean chest. The others strolled through the trees now. When they reached us, I offered my cloak to Gwendolyn, who was still freezing. Then I explained about the door stopper in as few words as possible. Raid and Kess had questions, but I told them not now. I found Gwen's lack of interest surprising, but I knew her mind was elsewhere when she appeared distant during my explanation. Given all that had happened, I didn't blame her. Once we reached the city, the priests went their separate way. The Lendons, too, though they left Miss Goddard's side only because they wanted to retrieve the Goddard device from the apothecary's basement before the Jakaree got any ideas. I offered to escort Gwendolyn the remainder of the way home, so we said farewell to Raid and Kess and promised never to do that sort of thing again. "Should I hail a coach?" I asked Gwen. Gwendolyn crossed her arms beneath my cloak and shook her head. "Can we walk?" Though the night remained cold, the snow had finally stopped. "Walking is fine," I said. "Need to clear your head?" Gwendolyn took measured breaths, rubbing her arms to hide her trembling. "Something like that," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. When we strolled a block, and she still trembled, I said, "It's only nerves. Happens to everyone." "Does it happen to you?" she shot back, her voice flaring with her more usual sharpness. "Not often, but I have more experience with this sort of thing. It's part of the job." Gwendolyn stopped. "I don't envy you." "Oh? The cost of what we do is too high. Tonight—" She let out a breath. "The priests killed my assistants, my guards. I thought they were going to kill me." She tried laughing, but it turned into a sob. "Turns out they saved that part for the witch." She faced me with tears streaking her cheeks. "I tried bargaining with her. She ignored me. I tried bribing her. She said she could already take anything she wanted. I know what she's been doing in the Shambles and what she had planned for me. I pleaded with her, practically begged her to stop. I've never faced such evil." "Did she say why she took you?" Gwendolyn wiped the tears from her face. "Something about my deep knowledge. The priests took my prototype, but she had no interest in it. She never asked me for anything. She went right to the sacrifice part. When Isadora extracts a person's blood, she also gains their knowledge. But you said deep knowledge. Utet said the same thing. Maybe taking every last secret from a person requires a more thorough process. That's why she took you to the grove." Gwendolyn nodded. "But why did she want me at all?" I had no answer other than to say, "She's gone, you know." "How certain are you of that?" I wasn't certain at all, but I said, "She's in a deep, dark hole, and she's never getting out." Gwendolyn sniffed. "I saw it." "Saw what?" "The deep, dark hole. The negative plane. Most call it the shadow realm. I only caught a glimpse through the open doorway." A shiver coursed through her. "Is that where—" "Never mind, I know it is. It's where I sent my brother. I didn't know how— Walter's trapped there forever in the dark, with no way out." In a sense, she was right. Walter was trapped. But he was also dead. Gwendolyn sent him to the Shadow Realm months ago. No way anyone survived that long there. No one can escape, can they? But somehow you did. "Few are as clever as I am," I said, trying to lighten the mood. Gwendolyn didn't quite laugh at that, but she did at least smile. "You're home, I presume?" I asked, gesturing ahead where I saw guards posted outside a gate. Beyond the manor's walls, lights shone, and I saw the movement of armored men on horses. "Looks like your captain's men are mounting a search party. Better go tell them not to bother." "You're not coming?" Gwendolyn asked. "I'd rather not have to explain myself to Captain Nelson," I said, figuring she understood. "Before you go, what about the energy analysis for the warders? Is there anything you can do now that the sample is gone?" "Oh, that," Gwendolyn said. I solved their problem before any of this happened. Idiots should have asked for my help in the first place. I'll set the meeting for tomorrow and invite Elizabeth. Would you like Mr. Dutton to attend as well? I shook my head. Not necessary. I trust you and Liz will bring things to a satisfying conclusion. I'm sorry, but I'm not sure if I can finish the energy detection device. I have the readings but can't properly test it without the sample. That's all right, I said. I know someone else working on something similar. It'll sort itself out, I'm sure. Speaking of sorting things out, maybe it's time to let bygones be bygones between you and Atticus. You've seen the bigger picture now. You know what's at stake. Why not put your rivalry aside, at least for now, and work together? Gwendolyn chewed her lip, thinking it over. I'll contact him in the morning. I can't guarantee he'll want to listen to anything I have to say, though. You may find him receptive to the idea of collaborating, especially where the Warders and Jakaree are concerned. It wouldn't hurt to have the Lendons, the Cranes, and whoever else working together instead of apart. You can always return to your bickering after the Warders and Jakaree are gone. She bobbed her head, and with that, turned to go. But before she took a step, she looked at me and said, "Thank you." "You're very welcome." Gwendolyn strolled away, smoothing her hair and regaining her poise with every step. Smiling, I wondered at the thrashing she meant to give Captain Nelson. 1, for not preventing her kidnapping, and 2, for not coming to find her sooner. I carried the amusing image in my mind all the way home. Thjorn looked like he wanted to smash something. Given what I just told him, I suppose that something was me. "Let me get this straight," he grumbled. "You want me to call the whole thing off? As in, don't get the word out about a powerful new piece of technology, so important the king has staked a claim on it. Don't let potential buyers know about a black market auction for it. And especially, don't make sure the king's agents get word of this illicit sale, so they can arrest this woman you profess to hate so much that you want her out of your life for good. Is that about right? Did I miss anything?" Hate is a rather strong word, but yes, I think you summed my request up nicely. Thjorn slammed his fist so hard on the table that half the tavern's patrons cast furtive glances our way. Most were smart enough to look away just as quickly. Catching Ophelia's worried look from behind the bar, I waved to her to say all was well, and to reassure her that a raging barbarian was not about to destroy all her furniture. Lifting his fist from the table, Thjorn kept squeezing his fingers tight until his knuckles turned white. "The only problem is that I already got the word out about the device, let my buyers know about it, and dropped all the right hints to the king's inspectors. The wheels are already in motion, and I can't stop them." "Humph," I said. "Sellers back out sometimes. I'm sure everyone will understand. Besides, are you telling me Thjorn Heavyhammer Targalus, the legendary Lord of Thieves, can't stop a deal from going down?" "That's exactly what I just said, isn't it? I made promises to make this happen. That puts my reputation on the line. I'm less concerned with the potential buyers than with the people I'll owe favors to if this thing unravels." "Yes, well, sorry about all that. However, circumstances have changed. A free Ms. Goddard holds significantly more value now than one languishing in the gulag." "Bah!" Thjorn violently sat back, muttering and shaking his head. At least his fist melted away as he waved at me in dismissal. "Fine, I'll call the deal off, but only because you did good with the witch. Malachi's spirit can at least rest in peace and go to his gods now, knowing she's dead. Damn witch is dead, isn't she? A friend told me that if we're lucky, she'll wander the Shadow Realm for the remainder of her days. Matilda also told me she didn't trust in luck, so she meant to continue her effort to open the Empyrean chest." Thjorn grunted. "I would have settled for plain old dead, but trapped forever will have to do. That aside, I still need you to do something for me." "What now?" I almost asked. But Thjorn had gone to a lot of trouble for me for nothing, so, hoping I didn't regret it, I said, "Anything." The new Grand Administrator of the King's Merchant League has barely taken over, and he's already making my life a living hell. More payback against the Guild? Something like that. Grand Administrator Storm is disrupting the Guild's usual business with the League. I had an arrangement with the previous administrator. Storm is disregarding that arrangement and costing me a lot of money. What about the assassins they sent? That kind of move demands retaliation. Heavyhammer gnashed his teeth. If it had happened a week ago, it'd already be done. But Storm and the others he appointed to the League work for the king now. He slammed his fist on the table again, almost upending our drinks. I can't move against them without risking the king's ire. The warders were clever, I'll give them that. By consolidating their operations under the banner of the Warding Mining and Manufacturing Company, they had cloaked their activities in an illusion of legitimacy. Additionally, under Chief Administrator Storm's direction, the League of Merchants declared the Warding Company a trusted partner, extending royal protections and such to their employees. Warder membership aside, a strike against the company's employees was akin to an affront to the crown itself. Such a move required a delicate touch and, above all else, secrecy. I knew what Thjorn wanted, but still had to ask the question. So, what do you want me to do? Thjorn leaned closer. Even the Lord of Thieves had to exercise discretion when speaking of murder. I want you to pay Mr. Storm a visit and put a knife through his heart. Since I anticipated the question, I fired back immediately. And then what? Huh? Thjorn looked at me in confusion. He'll be dead, that's what. Right. But how long before the warders replace him? They've already shown an aptitude for manipulating the succession of some of the most important positions across Alchester. I'm not saying we don't go after Storm. But how about we also target the one who's really in charge? The one pulling the strings behind the scenes? The one who sent those assassins to kill you? Thjorn leaned back. You mean their Primus? I didn't need to answer, so I stayed quiet, letting him think about it. I could go after Claire on my own. The old gods know I'd considered it. But that wasn't how my profession worked. I left the decisions about who lived and who died to others. My role was to ensure that when the moment for the kill arrived, it got done. What do you need? Thjorn asked. Special jobs like this had special requirements, so I laid it out for him. To my surprise, he denied me nothing. You're sure? I asked. The Warder Primus is heavily guarded. Some of your people may not survive. Even if we get to her, Claire is deadly enough on her own. His stern gaze told me he was prepared to bear the cost, regardless of whether or not his people were ready to do the same. And the society? You've no qualms about bringing them in? They're not killers, remember? Thjorn said. So, tell them only what they need to know. I saved the best, or the worst, for last. The Jakaree will insist on having a major role. Once I talk to them, we won't have any choice but to include them. Talk to them, is all he had to say to that. We parted with a promise to reconvene after I set the wheels in motion. As I stepped outside, the sun shining across the frozen ground dipped below the horizon, and darkness unfurled its cloak over the city, wrapping its tendrils around every corner and crevice. Night had always been my home, the shadows, my solitary ally. But it wasn't enough to act alone anymore. The unifying convergence fast approached, and given the growing influence of the warders, I saw no way to stop them other than by making alliances. The code says to never let a job become personal and never have regrets. But sometimes the code was wrong. Sometimes not making it personal is the biggest regret of all. You've reached the end of this adventure. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel to get a notification when each new story is available. You can view all my books and get the latest news by visiting scottmarlowe.com.